These are the 7 levels of Fallout, from power armor to mysteries and serial killers, starting with something that's a lot more disturbing than it seems. Vaults. Level 1. Trash vaults. These are the boring ones, the ones that actually worked like advertised. Out of 122 vaults built across America, only 17 were straight-up normal shelters where people could ride out the apocalypse without vault tech pulling some twisted experiment. Places like Vault 8 and Vault 76 fall into this category. They got their GX terraforming kits, their water chips didn't mysteriously fail, nobody was secretly dosing the air supply with hallucinogens, and they weren't filled with a man named Gary. Vault 8 in Nevada is the poster child here. It only opened 4 years later than it was supposed to. The dwellers used their Garden of Eden creation kit to terraform the wasteland, and boom, they founded Vault City by 2091. The place became this weirdly functional post-apocalyptic settlement with actual infrastructure and governance. Vault 76 in West Virginia is another control vault, the one you start in during Fallout 76. It was designed to open exactly 25 years after the bombs dropped on Reclamation Day, and it actually did. No weird twists or surprise cannibalism, just a bunch of people walking out into the wasteland to rebuild America like the brochures promised. These vaults matter because they prove Vault Tech could have saved people if they wanted to. They had the technology and resources to build genuine Fallout shelters, but instead they chose to run sick experiments on 105 of the 122 vaults they constructed. But here's the thing, if Vault Tech could build 17 working vaults, why make 105 death traps? Keep that question in mind, because the answer isn't what you think. Now let's see what happened when they started testing isolation. Level 2, Isolation Vaults. This level is where Vault Tech started testing how humans handle being completely cut off from everything. Vault 101 from Fallout 3 is the most famous example. The tagline was literally Vault 101, Jewel of the Wastes, but the real experiment was that nobody was ever supposed to leave, ever. The Overseer had standing orders to keep that vault sealed indefinitely, and anyone who even talked about opening the door was labeled a dissident. Your character's dad breaking this rule by escaping to find a water purifier is what kicks off the entire main quest of Fallout 3. Vault 13 from the original Fallout also falls here, though with a different spin. It was designed to stay sealed for 200 years to study prolonged isolation, but their water chip conveniently failed after just a few decades, forcing them to send someone out into the wasteland. That someone becomes the Vault Dweller, the protagonist of the first game, who has to trek across California looking for replacement parts. The whole water chip failure might have been intentional sabotage by Vault Tech to see what happens when isolated communities face extinction-level equipment failures. Vault 21 in New Vegas took isolation in a weird direction by making everything inside decided by gambling. Every dispute, every decision, every allocation of resources came down to games of chance. It worked surprisingly well until Mr. House showed up and won the vault in a game of blackjack, then filled most of it with concrete. The isolation experiments reveal Vault Tech's obsession with control and obedience. They wanted to know if they could create perfectly insulated societies that would follow orders without question. Communities so indoctrinated they'd never challenge authority even when it meant their own doom. These vaults often developed cult-like social structures where the Overseer was basically a dictator and questioning the system was heresy. The psychological damage from these experiments lasted generations, creating societies that couldn't adapt when they finally did open and face the real wasteland. But isolation was just psychology. What comes next is where Vault Tech started weaponizing human needs themselves, and one vault proves they'd even weaponize people's recovery just to watch them destroy each other. Level 3, Survival Experiments. Now Vault Tech wanted to see what happens when you give people just barely enough, or way too much of something specific. Vault 34 is the perfect example of too much. This vault near Vegas was stuffed with an absolutely insane amount of weapons and ammunition, way more than any civilian shelter would ever need. The experiment was basically what happens when everyone has unlimited access to guns in a confined space. Spoiler alert, they formed armed factions, fought over the reactor, and when it leaked radiation, most of them died. The survivors became the Boomers, that artillery-obsessed faction at Nellis Air Force Base who shoot at literally anyone who gets close. Vault 22 tested resource scarcity from a different angle, focusing on food production. They were experimenting with mutated plant spores to create fast-growing crops, which sounds genius until you learn the spores turned people into hostile plant zombie things. The scientists kept pushing their experiments even as dwellers started transforming, and eventually the whole vault became overrun with these spore carriers. You explore this nightmare in New Vegas, fighting through fungus-infected tunnels and mutated plants while reading terminal entries about how the scientists knew exactly what was happening and kept going anyway. Vault 95 weaponized addiction and recovery. It was advertised as a rehabilitation facility for chem addicts, a clean space where people could get sober and stay sober. For 5 years it actually worked. People kicked their habits and built a supportive community. Then, as planned, Vault Tech had a plan open a secret stash of chems in the walls. The resulting relapse destroyed everything. Dwellers turned on each other, and the vault fell apart. When you find it in Fallout 4, it's occupied by gunners who are using it as a base, completely unaware of the deliberately engineered tragedy that happened there. These experiments were Vault-Tech's way of studying human behavior under extreme conditions, specifically how societies function when basic needs become weapons. The data they collected was supposedly for planning long-term space colonization, figuring out minimum resource requirements for generation ships or Mars colonies, but really it was just corporate-funded sadism dressed up as science, watching people suffer for spreadsheets and graphs, or so it seemed, because every experiment was teaching Vault-Tech something specific about human breaking points. The question is, why did they need to know? Level 4, Social Experiment. This is where Vault-Tech crossed a different line. They weren't just studying how people break. They were discovering how to make people build entire societies around their own destruction. Vault 11 proves it, and what the computer told the last 5 survivors reveals exactly what Vault-Tech learned about human nature. Vault 11 is hands down one of the darkest experiments in the entire franchise. The Vault's computer told residents they had to sacrifice one person every year or everyone would die. They developed this whole electoral system where they'd vote for an overseer who would then be executed. Candidates used propaganda, bribery, and blackmail to avoid winning. Voting blocks formed, people manipulated elections, and this went on for years until one election cycle failed and only 5 people remained. They refused to sacrifice anyone, and when they finally told the computer no, it revealed the whole thing was a test and they'd actually passed by refusing. But by then, 4 of them killed each other in the aftermath, and only one survived, completely broken. That's the discovery Vault-Tech was after. Give humans the right rules, and they'll create systems that destroy them without question. They'll accept authority even when it's killing them. This data was worth everything to someone. But who? Vault 118 up in Far Harbor ran a class experiment. They divided the vault into sectors for rich elites and poor workers. But the workers section was never completed, so it ended up being just 10 ultra-wealthy people isolated together. And they eventually transferred their consciousnesses into robot bodies to achieve immortality. When you arrive, they're still there as these brainbots, completely unaware that centuries have passed and they're essentially digital ghosts acting out their pre-war aristocratic fantasies. Vault 19 in the Mojave tested paranoia by deliberately dividing dwellers into 2 groups, red and blue, and giving them separate sections of the vault. The computer systems were rigged to make each side think the other was sabotaging them. Subliminal messages, fake alerts, manipulated supply counts, all designed to manufacture conflict where none existed. Eventually, both groups abandoned the vault rather than fight, which is almost a happy ending by Vault-Tech standards. Vault 112 might be the cruelest. Dr. Braun, the overseer, trapped everyone in virtual reality pods running a simulation he controlled. For over 200 years, he's been psychologically torturing them, forcing them to live through scenario after scenario where he plays God. They can't die, can't escape, just endless cycles of whatever twisted narrative Braun feels like inflicting. Your interaction with this vault in Fallout 3 involves entering the simulation, and either helping the residents escape or helping Braun torture them more. Because even the player isn't safe from these moral nightmares. The social experiments prove Vault-Tech understood human psychology well enough to break it systematically. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were carefully designed scenarios testing specific hypotheses about authority, conformity, and social collapse. The Enclave wanted this data for colonization projects, figuring out exactly how much stress a closed society could handle before fracturing. Level 5, Evolution Experiments. Everything up to now was psychology and social control, but these next vaults reveal something darker. Vault-Tech wasn't trying to save humanity. They were trying to replace it, and in Vault 87, they actually succeeded. Vault 87 sits at the top of this category. This vault in the Capital Wasteland wasn't a shelter at all. It was a research facility testing the forced evolutionary virus. They were supposed to study FEV effects on human subjects, but study quickly became mass mutation experiment. Nearly every dweller was transformed into super mutants, those giant green monsters that populate the Capital Wasteland. The vault became ground zero for the East Coast super mutant population, and you can find it in Fallout 3, still crawling with mutants and radiation so intense that approaching from certain directions will kill you instantly. One of the few survivors who kept his mind is Fox, the super mutant companion you can recruit who was intelligent enough to realize what happened and hates Vault-Tech for it. Vault 92 ran audio-based mind control experiments. They filled this vault with musicians, supposedly to preserve performing arts through the apocalypse. But the real plan involved subliminal messaging hidden in white noise played constantly through the vault's speaker system. The messages were supposed to create super soldiers by conditioning extreme aggression and obedience to commands. Instead, everyone went violently insane, killing each other in brutal rampages. When you explore it in Fallout 3, you find terminal entries from a violinist who slowly realizes the music is changing him, making him angry and violent, but he can't stop it or escape. Vault 96 in Fallout 76 was sold as an animal preservation project, basically Noah's Ark for wasteland creatures. What residents didn't know was that Vault Tech was using them to test aggressive mutation serums on the animals. They had quotas for genetic modifications, pushing mutations harder and faster to see what would happen. Predictably, the creatures became unstable and dangerous. And after the dwellers died to the Vault's mainframe activating a superseding security protocol during their failed escape attempt, the mutated creatures escaped. The specimens went into Appalachia, which explains some of the more horrifying mutated wildlife you encounter. Vault 75. Beneath a middle school ran a eugenics program focused on children. Kids were separated from parents on entry, told their families died, and raised in an underground facility that constantly tested them through brutal competition. The weakest were reclaimed, which Vault Tech speaks of being murdered and harvested for genetic material. The strongest were bred to create perfect specimens. The scientists pushed this for generations until the teenagers eventually figured it out and revolted, killing all the researchers. You can explore this vault in Fallout 4 and read the heartbreaking terminal entries from both the kids and the scientists who rationalized atrocity as progress. Each experiment maps perfectly to a specific problem, but what problem were they solving? That's next. These biological experiments represent Vault Tech at its most callous, treating human life as raw material for science. The goal was ostensibly to understand genetic manipulation and create enhanced humans for space colonization, but the methods were straight out of the worst moments in human history. Eugenics programs and unethical medical experimentation cranked up to apocalyptic extremes. Level 6. Experimental vaults. These vaults tested one final variable: minimum viable systems. How little technology do you need to keep humans alive in a closed environment? Because if you're noticing that every experiment sounds like preparation for something, you're right, and what comes after this explains everything. Vault 88, which you can explore and build in Fallout 4's DLC, was designed to test prototype Vault Tech technologies on unwitting subjects. The Overseer, who survived as a ghoul, was working on devices like exercise bikes that drained life force, soda machines that dispensed chems, and slot machines rigged for behavior modification. The vault was never finished before the bombs dropped, so the experiments never ran at full scale. But you can choose to complete them yourself or sabotage the Overseer's plans and make the technology actually helpful. Vault 114 took a different approach, experimenting with leadership structures through architecture. This vault beneath a subway station in Boston was deliberately designed to be uncomfortable. The Overseer's room was a transparent office in the middle of everything with zero privacy, and the whole vault was built to create constant tension between authority figures and residents. The idea was to test if leaders could maintain control when they had no special privileges or private space. Construction never finished before the war, so the experiment never ran, but the criminal Skinny Malone moved in and made it his headquarters in Fallout 4. Vault 108 had a cloning lab because Vault Tech wanted to know what happens when you can mass-produce humans. The Overseer was terminally ill, and the plan was to clone one resident named Gary over and over to study hive mind dynamics and identity degradation. Instead, the Garys gained sentience as a collective, realized they were being used, and turned on everyone else. By the time you reach this vault in Fallout 3, it's entirely populated by hostile Gary clones who can only say their own name, creating this deeply unsettling atmosphere where every enemy is the same person copied hundreds of times. Vault 106 tested chemical warfare technology through psychoactive drugs pumped into the ventilation system. The gas was supposed to induce hallucinations and paranoia, which it absolutely did. 10 days after the vault sealed, dwellers started experiencing vivid hallucinations and violent delusions. The vault descended into chaos as people attacked hallucinations that looked like their friends and family. Centuries later, when you explore it, the gas is still active, causing the lone wanderer to hallucinate during exploration, seeing fake enemies and distorted versions of reality. The technology experiments show Vault Tech's complete disregard for safety protocols or ethics. They were testing prototype devices that should have gone through decades of trials, instead throwing them into live environments with real people. The Enclave wanted data on cutting-edge tech for their projects, and Vault Tech was happy to provide it regardless of cost. These vaults often left behind functioning but dangerous technology that wastelanders stumbled into, creating new threats centuries after the original experiments ended. Level 7. Legendary Vaults. Here's what every single experiment was actually for. Vault Tech and the Enclave weren't preparing to survive nuclear war, they were preparing to leave Earth entirely. According to Fallout's co-creator Tim Kaine, Vault Tech and the Enclave designed these experiments to gather data for an interstellar colonization project. They believed Earth might become completely uninhabitable, and wanted to understand how humans would survive on generation ships traveling to other planets. Every experiment tested a different variable relevant to space travel. Isolation mirrors deep space missions, resource scarcity reflects limited limited ship supplies, social engineering explores governance and closed systems, biological experiments prepare for alien environments, and technology tests determine minimum viable systems. The Enclave, remnants of the US government, monitored all the vaults from remote locations, collecting data transmitted from each overseer. They planned to USC this research to select the strongest survivors for their ARC project if Earth truly became unlivable. The vaults were essentially massive lab rats, with 105 out of 122 facilities running some kind of experiment while the 17 control vaults provided baseline data. The vaults were never shelters. They were simulations of generation ships, and every person who walked into one thinking they'd be saved became a test subject for humanity's escape plan. But here's where it gets even darker. Vault-Tec sold this to the government by framing it as necessary preparation for humanity's survival, the ultimate contingency plan that required extreme measures. The Fallout TV series that dropped in 2024 adds another layer to this. It reveals Vault-Tec executives meeting before the war, discussing their experiments and plans. Vaults 31 through 33 form a connected system where Vault 31 holds cryogenically frozen Vault-Tec management who periodically wake up to oversee and manipulate the other two vaults, essentially creating a perpetual corporation that outlives the apocalypse. The show hints that Vault-Tec might have had a hand in starting the Great War itself, ensuring their vaults would be needed and their experiments could proceed. While that's not confirmed in game canon, it fits the pattern of corporate evil that defines Vault-Tec's legacy. What makes this endgame truly disturbing is the scale of the lie. Vault-Tec spent billions of dollars, involved thousands of employees, and built 122 facilities, all while maintaining the facade of salvation. The advertising, the Vault Boy mascot giving thumbs up, the cheerful instructional videos about surviving atomic war, it was all marketing for the largest unethical human experiment in history. Families bought into this promise of safety, paid for vault spots, and walked into their assigned shelters thinking they'd secured their future. Instead, they became test subjects in scenarios designed to break them. The data collected from these experiments supposedly justified the suffering, providing insights into human psychology and society under extreme stress. But even if the Enclave used this information for space colonization, it doesn't change what happened to the people trapped in vaults, living their entire lives as unwitting participants in someone else's grand design. Vault survivors who emerged into the wasteland, either because their vault failed or succeeded, spread across America and influenced the formation of major factions. The new California Republic traces its roots to vault dwellers. The Brotherhood of Steel interacted with vault technology constantly, and super mutants from vault experiments shaped entire regions. The Vault-Tec Corporation itself was deeply embedded in pre-war America, with university campuses, demonstration vaults, and promotional centers spreading their brand. Vault-Tec University in Fallout 76 was a training facility for vault personnel, but even there, Vault-Tec ran experiments, starving the students to test emergency rationing protocols. The demonstration vault in Los Angeles, which appears in Fallout 1, was meant to show off vault technology to potential customers, but later became the master's base of operations, proving that even Vault-Tec's public relations efforts came back to haunt the wasteland. Vault-Tec didn't fail, they succeeded. Every experiment proved what they wanted to know: humans adapt. We suffer, obey, rebuild, and survive. Even after centuries of cruelty, their systems still echo through the wasteland. Level 1. Trash Armor. Raider Power Armor is what happens when you give a meth head a blowtorch and tell them to fix military hardware. Scavengers slap together whatever metal scraps they can find, bolt it onto a stolen frame, and call it a day. The Raiders don't care about mil-spec standards or proper hydraulic calibration. They just want something that stops bullets better than their leather jacket and looks intimidating enough to make settlers piss themselves. You'll find these rust buckets worn by gangs like the Disciples or just random psychos who got lucky looting a military convoy. The protection is garbage tier, offering 500 base damage resistance for physical hits and 250 for energy weapons, which sounds decent until you realize that's the exact same stats as proper T-45 armor, but without any of the actual craftsmanship or quality control. The energy resistance especially is pathetic compared to later models. Radiation protection sits at 1050, which is actually respectable, but that's only because the Raiders accidentally left the proper shielding intact when they were hacking everything else apart. The carry weight bonus is completely non-existent, meaning you're lugging around a heavy frame with zero practical benefits beyond protection. Most Raiders can't even get the servo motors working properly, so you're missing that sweet strength boost that makes power armor actually worth wearing. The suits drain fusion cores at standard rate despite providing inferior protection, which is the wasteland equivalent of driving a gas-guzzling junker that breaks down every 50 miles. It's the participation trophy of power armor, proof that even idiots with zero technical training can cobble together something that technically functions. But hey, at least you're not running around naked in a world full of deathclaws and super mutants. The tribal variant is even worse, featuring literal patchwork construction with whatever materials happen to be available available, including wood and scrap metal that has no business being on a power armor frame, you're probably thinking it only gets better from here. And you'd be right, except for one suit we'll hit later that's even worse than this in combat. But players still wear it religiously. Why? That answer's coming. Level 2. Starter Armor. The T-45 was the United States military's first real attempt at powered combat armor, rolled out in 2067 when the government finally realized sending regular soldiers against Chinese tanks and powered infantry was basically assisted suicide. This thing is a tank with legs, designed to turn regular infantry into walking fortresses during the Alaskan campaign against Chinese occupation forces. It's got steel plating reinforced with composite materials, hydraulic servos pumping enough force to let soldiers lift and fire heavy weapons with one hand, and enough protection to laugh at small arms fire while shrugging off most explosives. The armor features a full environmental seal with air filtration, radiation shielding built into every plate, and a targeting heads-up display that tracks enemy movement and ammunition counts. The stats tell the story of compromise. T-45 offers 500 base damage resistance for physical attacks, which will stop most conventional firearms and keep you alive against deathclaw swipes. Energy resistance is only 250 though, meaning laser and plasma weapons will cook you faster than a radroach in a microwave. Radiation protection hits 1050, providing solid shielding for exploring the glowing sea or other hot zones without turning into a ghoul. The full set gives you 100 pounds of extra carry weight, which is clutch when you're hauling mini nukes and heavy weapons. The servo motors provide a flat strength boost when the armor is properly powered, letting you handle weapons that would normally require a tripod mount. But here's the kicker. Fusion core drain is standard rate, meaning you're burning through power cells at the same pace as superior armor that offers way better protection. It's like driving a truck that gets the same mileage as a sports car, but only goes half as fast. In gameplay terms, T-45 is your starter power armor in Fallout 4, literally handed to you and conquered during the When Freedom Calls quest. When you're fighting your first Deathclaw with a minigun you found on a roof. It's a tutorial sequence designed to make you feel like an absolute god until you realize the fusion core runs out in 20 minutes and replacement cores cost more caps than you've ever seen. The suits are everywhere though. Over 30 documented spawn locations across the Commonwealth. You'll find frames at military checkpoints, National Guard depots, crashed vertibirds, and random rooftops where soldiers made their last stand. Modding options include hardened lining for extra damage resistance, a medic pump that auto-injects chems, targeting HUDs for better VATS accuracy, and kinetic servos that increase movement speed. You can paint it different colors if you want to roleplay or just make yourself a bigger target. It's the Honda Civic of power armor. Reliable, common, and nobody brags about wearing one when there's literally any other option available. T-45 is handed to you in 20 minutes. But here's what the military doesn't advertise. They rushed this into production so fast it had fatal flaws. The real question is why they rushed it. And that answer comes with the armor that actually won the war. Keep that in mind. Level 3. Worker Armor. Here's that suit I mentioned. The one that's worse than Raider armor in combat. 240 base damage resistance. Pathetic. A pipe rifle can shred you. So why do endgame players use it? Forget war for a second, somebody finally made power armor for people who actually contribute to society. Excavator armor was designed by West Tech engineer Harold Frost specifically for mining operations, and it shows in every rivet, joint, and hydraulic system. This isn't about surviving bullets or energy weapons or super mutant haymakers. It's about surviving cave-ins, carrying literal tons of ore without your spine turning into powder, and working 16-hour shifts in conditions that would kill an unaugmented human. There's no carry weight bonus listed in the base specs, but that's misleading as hell. Here's where Excavator becomes absolutely essential for certain builds. The armor quadruples your ore yield when mining resource nodes, turning every deposit into a jackpot. One node that normally gives you 5 steel scraps will spit out 20 instead. That multiplier applies to everything. Iron, lead, copper, aluminum, all the materials you need for crafting and building. The true carry weight bonus is huge too, a full 100 pounds that stacks with strength perks and backpack mods. You become a walking forklift capable of hauling entire workshops worth of junk back to base. The helmet features ore detection sensors that highlight mineral deposits through walls and terrain, basically giving you X-ray vision for resources. You'll be wandering through the wasteland and suddenly your HUD lights up showing you there's a lead vein buried in that cliff face or an aluminum deposit under that building. For resource hoarders and settlement builders, this is game-changing information that would normally require extensive exploration and dumb luck. The payoff is niche, but powerful for specific playstyles. If you're running a scavenging build focused on gathering materials, exploring every location, and building elaborate settlements, Excavator is your best friend and constant companion. If you're doing a combat-focused playthrough where you're fighting scorch beasts and running raids, you'll get shredded like tissue paper. It's proof that not every power armor needs to be a weapon of war. Sometimes you just need to dig holes, carry obscene amounts amounts of stuff and keep the economy running without your spine collapsing into dust. Remember this armor, because when we get to the rarest suit in the game, the one that costs months to get, you'll realize Excavator is actually the secret weapon for getting there. But first, let's talk about the suit that proved power armor could actually win wars. Level 4, Classic Armor. Remember when I said T-45 was rushed into production with fatal flaws? This is why. They were buying time until T-51 was ready. The T-51 is widely considered the pinnacle of American power armor development before the bombs dropped, and for good reason this suit won actual wars and changed the course of history. The coating is a polylaminate composite with reflective properties specifically designed to disperse laser and plasma fire across the surface instead of letting it burn through. The armor plating uses a titanium alloy matrix that's significantly lighter than T-45's steel construction while providing superior protection against kinetic impacts. This was the armor that reclaimed Anchorage from Chinese occupation and made their forces retreat in disorganized chaos. American soldiers in T-51 suits walked through conventional defensive positions like they weren't even there, shrugging off everything from small arms to artillery. The Chinese tried developing their own powered armor to counter it, but their communist model was inferior in every measurable way. The Brotherhood of Steel treats these suits like holy relics because they represent everything the old world did right before it nuked itself into radioactive oblivion. When you put on T-51, you're wearing a piece of pre-war history that actually lived up to the propaganda hype. This is the suit that proved power armor was worth the absurd development costs and resource investment. It's not the absolute best anymore, but it's the armor that defined what power armor should be. T-51 won the war. It was the pinnacle of pre-war engineering. So why did the Brotherhood of Steel abandon it 10 years after Fallout 3? The answer involves a suit that technically shouldn't exist, and it starts one of the biggest controversies in Fallout lore. Let's get into it. Level 5, Elite Armor. T-60 is the controversial favorite that showed up fashionably late to the apocalypse and immediately started arguments. And here's where we need to talk about the secret I mentioned at the start, because T-60 proves that the best armor isn't about raw stats. Introduced in Fallout 4 with zero prior mention in any previous game, this suit supposedly rolled out post-Anchorage in 2077 for domestic riot control, which makes lore enthusiasts scream retcon louder than a super mutant with a minigun. The timeline is sus as hell. T-60 appears in Fallout 4 as the Brotherhood of Steel's standard issue armor, but Fallout 3 showed them using T-45 exclusively just 10 years earlier in the same general region. New Vegas never mentioned it. Earlier games definitely didn't have it. Bethesda basically invented a new top-tier armor and inserted it into the timeline right before the bombs fell, claiming it was mass-produced and distributed, but somehow nobody found any for 200 years. The community is split between people who accept it as canon and people who think Bethesda just wanted a new armor design without worrying about continuity. Lore debates aside, T-60 is objectively superior to T-51 in raw numerical protection. It delivers 565 base physical damage resistance and 470 for both energy and radiation, making it significantly tougher than the previous standard. The armor uses advanced composite plating that's thicker and heavier than T-51's titanium alloy, prioritizing maximum protection over mobility. The frame is bulkier and more intimidating, covered in heavy plating that screams American military excess and over-engineering. It's what happens when the government throws unlimited budget at the problem and tells engineers to make the scariest looking armor possible. The design philosophy is pure pre-war America. Bigger is better. More armor is always the answer. And who cares about efficiency when you can just brute force the problem? The servo motors are more powerful to handle the additional weight. The fusion pack is larger, and the whole suit is designed to make the wearer look like an unstoppable walking tank. The helmet features an upgraded targeting system, enhanced communication equipment, and a voice modulator that makes you sound appropriately intimidating. This was what the government was mass-producing when the nuclear exchange happened, meaning parts and full suits are surprisingly common despite being top-tier hardware. The military was in the process of replacing T-45 models with T-60 for domestic operations. The armor was never meant to fight Chinese soldiers. It was meant to fight American citizens who were starving and angry about resource shortages. Elder Maxon's Brotherhood of Steel runs entire squads exclusively in T-60, making it their signature look in Fallout 4. When you see Brotherhood Knights and Paladins stomping around the Commonwealth or rappelling from vertibirds, they're wearing T-60. The Pridwin carries dozens of suits, and Brotherhood patrols are walking advertisements for pre-war American military hardware. You'll find T-60 sets scattered across military checkpoints, National Guard armories, Brotherhood bases, and high-level randomized spawns. The armor starts appearing at higher player levels, replacing some T-45 spawns with upgraded parts. A full set can be acquired from Brotherhood questlines or by systematically looting every military installation in the Commonwealth. The carry weight bonus is 75 pounds for a complete set, splitting the difference between T-45's 100 and T-51's 50. The fusion core drain is standard rate, same as every other power armor except specialized variants. The strength boost lets you dominate in melee combat and wield heavy weapons like their rifles. Tesla electrodes create an electrical field that damages and stuns nearby enemies, turning you into a walking bug zapper. The standard suite includes a jetpack for vertical mobility, optimized servos for better movement speed, targeting Hue Die for VATS improvements, kinetic dynamo for action point regeneration, and emergency protocols that boost speed and damage resistance when health is low. The TV series version of T60 takes things even further, incorporating integrated jump jets for actual short-distance flight and what appears to be an improved fusion system. The show's armor looks even bulkier and more imposing. When Brotherhood Knights drop from vertibirds in the show, they're piloting what are essentially single-person tanks with legs. Some fans hate T60 for appearing out of nowhere in the established timeline without any logical explanation. Others appreciate having a new design that looks distinct from earlier models while providing genuinely superior stats. Complaining about retcons in Fallout is like complaining about radiation pointless, exhausting, and it's not going to change anything. T60 exists. It's powerful. It looks intimidating as hell, and the Brotherhood thinks it's the pinnacle of pre-war military technology. But here's the thing, T60 has higher stats than T51. But is it actually better? That's debatable. And this debate gets even weirder when you see what comes next, because there's a suit with experimental tech that was never finished, until the Enclave spent 200 years perfecting it. That's where things get wild. Level 6. Prototype armor. This is the secret that separates Wasteland gods from everyone else. X01 is the what-if armor that never got its moment in the sun until after the world ended. This was supposed to be America's next-generation prototype, a post-T51 improvement that remained experimental and buggy when the Great War turned everyone into shadows on concrete. The development timeline is complicated and shrouded in pre-war secrecy. X01 was being tested in 2077 as a potential successor to the T51 platform, incorporating experimental technologies and materials that went beyond conventional armor design. The prototypes were limited in number, plagued with technical issues, and never reached full production before the bombs dropped. Most of the research data, schematics, and prototype units were destroyed in the nuclear exchange, making X01 one of the rarest armor platforms in existence. The Enclave changed everything. They salvaged X01 schematics and prototype data before October 23rd, preserving the research in secure bunkers and oil rig facilities. For the next century plus, Enclave scientists and engineers worked on perfecting the design, fixing the bugs, and pushing the technology far beyond its original specifications. The result was advanced power armor, the Enclave's signature armor that represents the absolute cutting edge of power armor development. These suits represent genuine post-war innovation built on pre-war foundations. The armor uses ceramic composite plating that's lighter and stronger than anything developed before the war, with a polymer matrix that distributes impact force across the entire frame. The servo motors are more sophisticated, the power system is more efficient, and the entire suit is designed with lessons learned from 2 centuries of combat experience. The helmet features advanced sensor suites, enhanced vision modes including thermal and night vision, an improved targeting computer, and a voice modulator that makes Enclave soldiers sound like authoritarian death robots. Base X01 stats are impressive, but the Enclave variants are where things get ridiculous. Standard X01 provides excellent protection across the board with high damage resistance values that compete with T60. The Enclave Advanced Power Armor Mark II pushes physical damage resistance to 620, making it the most protective suit in the entire franchise for stopping bullets and kinetic impacts. Energy resistance sits at 250, which is somewhat lower than physical, and radiation protection is 1050 like most other suits. The carry weight bonus is 50 pounds for a full set, same as T51. Fusion core drain is standard rate despite the advanced technology, proving even future armor can't solve the fundamental energy crisis that plagues all powered systems. The servo motors provide the standard strength boost that's consistent across all power armor platforms. Specialized Enclave variants take the platform in different directions. Hellfire armor was developed as a prototype reallocation that sacrifices some physical protection for dramatically enhanced energy resistance, making it ideal for fighting enemies with laser and plasma weapons. The armor is painted black and orange with vents that glow red, looking like you crawled out of hell itself. X02 armor prioritizes agility and mobility over raw protection, featuring lighter plating and enhanced servo motors for soldiers who need to move fast while still having power armor protection. The Quantum variant is pure post-war insanity. Someone figured out how to integrate strontium-90 isotope plating into X01 frames, making the entire suit glow blue like Nuka-Cola Quantum. It provides enhanced radiation resistance and looks absolutely incredible, like you're piloting a radioactive ghost. The Institute apparently developed their own version called X01I that incorporates polymer upgrades and intelligence-boosting modifications, because apparently nerds need power armor too. The concept art shows white and gray plating with exposed Institute technology, but this variant never made it into the final game. Finding X01 usually means endgame exploration or completing high-level faction content. content. Fallout 4 hides full sets in remote locations accessible only to high-level players. The abandoned shack near the glowing sea has a full set locked behind a master terminal. Custom House Tower in downtown Boston has pieces scattered across the upper floors. Court 35 has a full frame if you're willing to fight through the building. The randomized spawns start appearing after level 28, gradually replacing lower-tier armor in certain locations. The Enclave variants appear in Fallout 2, Fallout 3, and Fallout 76 as faction-specific armor worn by Enclave soldiers and officers. You'll be fighting Enclave patrols and killing them for their armor, or completing questlines that reward you with suits. In Fallout 76, you can eventually craft X01 using plans purchased with caps, making it more accessible than previous games where you had to loot or steal every piece. Modifications follow the standard power armor suite: jetpack for mobility, optimized servos for speed, targeting HUD for combat bonuses, kinetic dynamo for action points, and emergency protocols for last stand situations. The Enclave variants often come with unique mods installed like Tesla coils for energy deflection, or sensor arrays for enhanced detection. When you wear X01 or advanced power armor, you're piloting the pinnacle of pre-war ambition refined by post-apocalyptic desperation. This is what happens when you take experimental technology and spend 200 years perfecting it without ethical oversight or budget constraints. It's armor designed by people who survived the apocalypse and decided they were going to rebuild America their way, whether anyone else liked it or not. X01 is post-war evolution. The Enclave perfected what pre-war America couldn't finish. But even this isn't the true endgame, because there's one suit that breaks every rule genuinely built from scratch after the bombs fell. And getting it? That's where the game tests whether you're truly committed. Let me explain why people grind for months to get armor with the same stats as what we just covered. Level 7, God tier. Here's the paradox I promised. T65 has the exact same stats as T60. 565 physical resistance, 470 energy, 75 pounds carry weight, identical. So why do players grind for months to get it? Welcome to the absolute peak armor, so exclusive you can't just stumble across it in some abandoned military base. T65 represents something genuinely revolutionary in the Fallout universe. Legitimate post-war innovation that isn't just refurbished pre-war technology or Enclave improvements on old designs. T65 was developed by the Secret Service after the Great War, meaning this is genuine post-apocalyptic engineering built from scratch using knowledge preserved from before. The bombs and innovations discovered during survival. The Secret Service maintained their operations in various secure bunkers, preserving technical expertise and continuing research and development programs while the rest of America turned into a radioactive nightmare. They designed T65 specifically for protecting high-value government personnel and assets, creating a suit that matched or exceeded the best pre-war models. The development represents a massive achievement in a world where most people are struggling to manufacture bullets and keep generators running. Creating an entirely new power armor platform requires industrial capabilities, material science knowledge, advanced manufacturing equipment, and skilled engineers, all things that should be impossible in the post-apocalypse. The Secret Service somehow maintained all of this, proving that pockets of pre-war expertise survived and continued advancing technology. Getting T65 requires engaging with Fallout 76's endgame progression system in ways that will test your patience and dedication. You need to grind treasury notes through daily quests, events, and faction activities, then convert those notes into gold bullion at specific vendors. The plans for T65 cost massive amounts of bullion purchased from a vendor named Regs, who operates out of Vault 79. We're talking thousands of bullion for the complete set of plans: chest, helmet, arms, legs, and all the individual modifications. The grind is intentionally brutal. Daily quests give limited treasury notes. Bullion conversion is capped per day, and the plan costs are astronomical. You're looking at weeks or months of consistent play to afford everything. Then you still need to gather all the crafting materials: steel, aluminum, screws, springs, circuitry, and other components in quantities that would make a scavenger weep. The bullion system makes casual players give up entirely, but that's the point. T65 is endgame content for people who've exhausted everything else and need new goals. The payoff matches the investment. T65 delivers 565 base physical damage resistance, matching T60 while being significantly rarer and more prestigious. Energy resistance hits 470, same as T60. Radiation protection is 470 as well, creating a balanced defensive profile that handles all threat types equally. The carry weight bonus is 75 pounds for a full set, identical to T60's bonus. So why grind for T65 when T60 offers identical stats and can be found lying around the wasteland? Because the T65 represents post-war achievement and exclusivity that T60 can't match. It's armor built by survivors for survivors, incorporating lessons learned from 2 centuries of fighting in the wasteland. The design is sleeker than T60's bulky profile, with more sophisticated lines and modern engineering that doesn't rely on pre-war over-engineering. The servo motors are optimized, the weight distribution is better, and the whole suit feels like it was designed by people who actually had to live and fight in power armor rather than just months testing it in controlled environments. The Secret Service built T-65 specifically for protecting what remained of government interests in Appalachia and beyond. Its armor designed for an elite few who survived the apocalypse and maintained institutional knowledge instead of descending into tribalism or gang warfare. Wearing T-65 makes a statement. You're not some raider scraping by with salvaged junk. You're not Brotherhood muscle wearing mass-produced military surplus. You're wearing bespoke post-war engineering that represents the peak of current manufacturing capability. Customization options include the full suite of modern modifications that make power armor genuinely versatile. Jetpack attachment transforms mobility, letting you leap over obstacles and access areas that would normally require walking around. Calibrated shocks add extra carry weight for dedicated scavengers. Emergency protocols activate when health is low, providing damage resistance boosts and movement speed that can save your life in bad situations. Kinetic dynamo generates action points when you sprint, enabling more VATS usage or power attacks. Targeting HUD highlights enemies and improves accuracy. Tesla coils electrocute melee attackers who get too close. Paint schemes let you customize appearance to match your style or faction allegiance. The Secret Service has their official colors, but you can unlock other patterns through achievements and challenges. Some players treat their T-65 like a custom hot rod, painting it wild colors and covering it in decals. Others keep it clean and professional, emphasizing the military precision of the design. The existence of T-65 proves something crucial about the Fallout universe. The Wasteland isn't just about scavenging old-world scraps and slowly regressing to barbarism. Some survivors maintained knowledge, preserved technology, and continued innovating despite the apocalypse. The Secret Service represents institutional continuity that persisted through nuclear war and centuries of chaos. They kept the lights on, maintained their mission, and eventually developed new technology that matches or exceeds pre-war achievements. This is hopeful in a franchise that often emphasizes decay and failure. T-65 suggests that recovery is possible, that humanity can rebuild rather than just survive on the ruins of the past. The armor represents the first generation of genuinely post-war military technology, designed by people born in the Wasteland for conditions that didn't exist before the bombs. It's not a museum piece or salvaged relic. It's a working tool built by survivors who refused to give up on civilization. When you finally assemble a full set of T-65 after weeks of grinding, you're not wearing history, you're making it. You're piloting armor that represents post-apocalyptic achievement rather than pre-war excess. You're proof that humanity can still create something new and impressive even after nuclear annihilation. You're wearing the future instead of the past. So, back to that question. Why grind months for the same stats as T-60? Because this isn't about numbers anymore. T-60 is pre-war excess. America throwing unlimited resources at problems. T-65 is post-war achievement. Survivors rebuilding better than before with limited resources and 2 centuries of hard-won experience. When you wear T-60, you're cosplaying the old world. When you wear T-65, you're wearing proof that humanity didn't just survive the apocalypse. We evolved past it. That's why the stats don't matter. That's the secret. T-65 is the god tier because it represents the absolute peak of what's currently achievable in the post-war wasteland. It's not experimental enclave prototypes or refurbished military surplus. It's working, functional, modern armor built by people who survived the end of the world and decided to keep advancing. When you wear T-65, you're not wearing the past. You're wearing the future, and that's why it's god tier. Level 1. Scavenged weapons. The Alien Blaster is the crown jewel of Fallout 1's uniques. This energy pistol shows up in a random UFO crash encounter, and finding it requires pure luck, since special encounters trigger based on your luck stat and how much you explore. The weapon itself deals absurd energy damage, way beyond anything else you can find at that point in the game. The catch is the ammo. You get a limited supply of alien power cells, and there's no way to get more. Every shot matters. You're not spraying this thing at rad roaches. You're saving it for Deathclaws, super mutants, and the Master himself. The Alien Blaster represents everything unique weapons should be. Rare, powerful, and earned through exploration rather than handed to you on a silver platter. The 223 pistol is another powerhouse, and it comes from Zack in the Gunrunner's Fortress in the Boneyard. It's technically a pistol, but it hits harder than most rifles in the game. The damage output is insane for a sidearm, and it uses .223 ammunition, which is relatively common compared to alien cells. This makes it way more practical than the Alien Blaster for everyday use. The 223 pistol proves that unique weapons don't have to be game-breaking to be special. Sometimes being consistently excellent is better than being occasionally god tier. Players loved this gun because it rewarded them for engaging with NPCs and doing side content instead of just murdering everything that moved. The Turbo Plasma Rifle takes a different approach. Instead of finding it or getting it as a quest reward, you create it. Smitty and Aditum can upgrade any plasma rifle you own into the Turbo version if you help them fix the hydroponic farms. The upgrade reduces the action points you need to fire, which in a turn-based turn-based game is absolutely massive. Fewer action points per shot means more shots per turn, which means more dead enemies before they get to act. The turbo plasma rifle isn't about raw damage. It's about efficiency and action economy. It turns energy weapon, builds from good to dominant, and it shows that unique weapons can come from crafting and NPC services, not just looting corpses. The Red Ryder LE BB gun is pure Fallout humor. It's a BB gun, which sounds pathetic, but this limited edition version actually does decent damage for a joke weapon. The stock is stamped with Bob's Pre-Owned Car Mart, a reference to a car dealership, and it's hidden in a special encounter just like the Alien Blaster. Finding it requires exploration and luck, and while it's not going to carry you through the endgame, it's a fun novelty that proves Fallout never took itself too seriously. The Red Ryder also started a tradition. Almost every Fallout game since has included some kind of joke weapon or pop culture reference hidden in the world, and it all traces back to this goofy BB gun. The 9mm Mauser rounds out the 5. It's the weakest of the uniques, but it's still better than the standard 9mm pistol you start with. You can buy it or find it in certain locations, and while it's not as exciting as the Alien Blaster or 223 pistol, it fills a role. Early game players who invest in small guns can grab the Mauser and have a reliable sidearm that won't drain rare ammo. Not every unique weapon needs to be legendary. Sometimes being a solid, accessible upgrade is enough. The Mauser taught the series that unique weapons should exist at multiple power levels, giving players at different stages of the game something special to chase. Level 2. Weird weapons. The Holy Hand Grenade is the perfect example. This thing deals 300 to 500 explosion damage, enough to vaporize anything short of a tank, and it's a direct rip from Monty Python's Holy Grail. The lore says you have to count to 3 before throwing it, which is pulled straight from the movie. Finding it requires triggering a special encounter, and when you finally chuck it at a group of Enclave soldiers and watch them explode into pink mist, you feel like the devs personally high-fived you. The Holy Hand Grenade isn't just a weapon, it's a joke, a reference, and a nuclear bomb all in one package. It proves that unique weapons can be funny and functional at the same time. Little Jesus is the opposite vibe. This combat knife is hidden in New Reno's criminal underworld, and it outperforms every other non-powered blade in the game. The name itself is darkly comedic, a play on religious imagery in a city drowning in vice and violence. Getting it requires navigating New Reno's gang politics, which means making choices and picking sides. The knife rewards players who dive deep into the faction content instead of just mainlining the critical path. It's sharp, it's deadly, and it's tied to one of the game's most memorable locations. Little Jesus shows that unique weapons can be rewards for understanding the world and the people in it. The Louisville Slugger brings that post-apocalyptic sports nostalgia. It's a heavy baseball bat named after the real Louisville Slugger Company, and it hits like a truck. You can find it in New Reno, continuing the trend of that city being a treasure trove for unique gear. The bat itself is simple, no special effects, no gimmicks. It just does more damage than a regular bat and looks cooler. Sometimes that's all you need. The Louisville Slugger proves that not every unique weapon needs to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes being a really good version of a basic weapon is enough to make it memorable. The Solar Scorcher is where Fallout 2 gets sci-fi weird. This energy pistol recharges itself using sunlight, meaning you never run out of ammo as long as it's daytime. You find it in Vault 13 during a special encounter, and it's one of the most practical unique weapons in the game. Infinite ammo on an energy weapon means you can spam shots without worrying about resource management. The Solar Scorcher turns energy weapon builds from ammo-dependent to self-sufficient, and it rewards players who explore off the beaten path. It's powerful, it's unique, and it's tied to Vault 13, which carries emotional weight if you played the first game. The improved flamer comes from Algernon, a genius mechanic in New Reno, who can upgrade your flamethrower if you help him out. This is another crafted unique, similar to the turbo plasma rifle from Fallout 1. The upgrade increases damage and changes the fire mechanics, making it more effective at burning groups of enemies. Flamethrowers in Fallout 2 are already strong, but the improved flamer takes it to another level. It's a reward for talking to NPCs, doing side quests, and investing in relationships. Algernon won't help you unless you earn his trust, and that makes the weapon feel like a real achievement. Johnny's BB gun is another joke weapon, a Red Ryder variant tied to a side quest about a missing kid. You rescue Johnny from slavers, and he gives you his prized BB gun as thanks. It's not powerful, but it's sentimental. The quest itself is emotional, dealing with kidnapping and slavery, and the BB gun becomes a symbol of innocence in a brutal world. Fallout 2 uses this weapon to remind you that not everything in the wasteland is about power. Sometimes a weapon is just a memento, a reminder of a life you saved and a kid you helped. The plated boxing gloves round out the 7. These gloves add metal plates to your fists, turning you into a prize fighter. You find them in the Shark Club, a boxing ring in New Reno, and they're perfect for unarmed builds. The gloves do solid damage, and they fit the theme of New Reno's underground fighting scene. They're not flashy, they're not references, but they're functional and thematic. The plated boxing gloves show that unique weapons should fit the locations they're found in. A boxing ring should have special gloves. It just makes sense. So we've established two philosophies. Fallout 1 said unique weapons are rare treasures. Fallout 2 said they're jokes and references. But the next game would reject both approaches and ask a controversial question. What if unique weapons don't need stories at all? What if they just need to be good at killing? Fallout Tactics was about to find out if that was enough. Level 3. Battle Weapons. The Vindicator minigun is the poster child for Tactics heavy weapons. This beast has an insane rate of fire and massive ammo capacity, turning whoever equips it into a walking death machine. You find it late in the game during Brotherhood missions, and once you get it, suppressing fire becomes your new best friend. The Vindicator chews through ammunition like crazy, but the damage output justifies the expense. In Tactics, where you're controlling multiple squad members and positioning matters, having one person lay down covering fire with the Vindicator while others flank is a legitimate strategy. This weapon defined how players approached late-game missions. The Pancor Jackhammer is based on a real prototype shotgun, and in Tactics, it's an automatic combat shotgun that absolutely shreds at close range. The weapon fires in bursts, and each burst can drop multiple enemies if they're grouped together. You find it during specific missions, and it immediately becomes the go-to weapon for close-quarters specialists. The Jackhammer works perfectly with Tactics breach and clear gameplay. You stack your squad at a door, kick it open, and the guy with the Jackhammer clears the room before anyone can react. It's brutal, it's efficient, and it feels incredible when you execute it perfectly. The Bren gun shows up as a rare heavy weapon, a British light machine gun that somehow survived the apocalypse and made its way to the Midwest. It does solid sustained damage, and has good accuracy for a fully automatic weapon. The Bren gun fills a niche between assault rifles and miniguns, giving you automatic fire without burning through your entire ammo supply in 10 seconds. You usually find it on high-level enemies or as mission rewards, and getting one means your squad just leveled up. The Bren turns suppression from a nice bonus into a core strategy. The M249 Saw is another late-game find, a squad automatic weapon that balances damage and fire rate better than most other automatics. In Tactics, where ammo management matters because you're equipping an entire squad, the Saw is efficient enough to use regularly without going broke. You find it during Brotherhood supply runs or looted from tough enemies, and it immediately goes to your best shooter. The Saw is reliable, accurate, and powerful enough to handle most threats without requiring rare ammunition types. What makes Tactics interesting is how it treated weapons differently than mainline Fallout games. There are no quest-tied guns with emotional backstories. Instead, weapons are tools for squad tactics. The Vindicator isn't special because of who owned it. It's special because it changes how your squad fights. The Pancor Jackhammer isn't memorable because of lore. It's memorable because kicking down doors and clearing rooms with it feels amazing. Tactics proved that unique weapons don't always need stories. Sometimes being really good at a specific job is enough. But here's the problem. Without stories, these weapons became forgettable. Players remembered Maria from New Vegas. They remembered the Alien Blaster from Fallout 1. Nobody tells campfire stories about the Vindicator minigun. Tactics proved you could make unique weapons work without narrative, but it also proved you shouldn't, and Bethesda was watching. When Bethesda took over, they had a choice. Follow Interplay's story-driven approach, or Tactics' combat-focused design. They chose both, then cranked everything to 11. Level 4. Wasteland weapons. Fisto is a power fist you find in a derelict power plant, and it hits like a freight train. The name is ridiculous. The design is brutal, and finding it requires exploring a location most players would skip. It does massive damage. It looks like an industrial gauntlet ripped from a pre-war factory, and it turns unarmed builds into killing machines. Fisto proves that unique weapons don't need quests or NPCs to be special. Sometimes just hiding something powerful in a forgotten corner of the map is enough. The reward is finding it in the first place. The Board of Education is a nail-covered plank that screams improvised brutality. You find it in a school, which is darkly appropriate, and it does more damage than a regular board while also looking way cooler. The nails sticking out of it add visual flair and implied lethality. Someone in the wasteland took a piece of wood, hammered nails into it, and turned it into a weapon. That's peak Fallout. The Board of Education is unique, but it fits the world perfectly. It's the kind of thing you'd actually expect to find in a post-apocalyptic school. Lincoln's repeater sits in the Museum of History, and it's one of the most beloved unique weapons in Fallout 3. This lever-action rifle feels like something out of a cowboy movie, but it hits hard enough to drop super mutants in a few shots. It uses .44 Magnum ammo, which is relatively common, and it has solid accuracy and damage. The location ties into the game's lore about preserving pre-war history, and finding it feels like uncovering a piece of America's past. Lincoln's repeater is powerful, thematic, and iconic. It's everything a unique weapon should be. Blackhawk is a scoped .44 Magnum you get from Agatha after completing her radio quest. The quest itself is wholesome, helping an old woman get her family's violin, and the reward is this beast of a sidearm. The scope gives you better accuracy at range, and the damage is excellent for a pistol. Blackhawk becomes the go-to sidearm for players who want precision and style. It's not the strongest weapon in the game, but it's reliable, it's cool, and it's tied to one of the game's more memorable side quests. Agatha's quest proves that unique weapons feel better when you earn them through stories, not just looting. The experimental Marvy is where Fallout 3 gets absolutely insane. This is a fat man that shoots 8 mini nukes at once instead of 1. You find it in the National Guard Depot after completing a side quest, and the first time you fire it, you understand why it's called experimental. The screen fills with nuclear explosions, everything dies. And there's a good chance you die too because the blast radius is enormous. The Marvy is impractical, hilarious, and unforgettable. Fallout 3 was throwing everything at the wall, more weapons, more locations, more chaos. But quantity created a new problem. How do you make unique weapons feel special when there are dozens of them? The answer came from the DLCs, and it would set a dangerous precedent. It's a meme weapon that every player tries at least once, and it's a perfect example of Fallout 3's philosophy. More is better, even if it kills you. Jingwei's shock sword comes from the Operation Anchorage DLC, and it's an electrified blade from a pre-war Chinese general. The sword stuns enemies on hit, which is incredibly useful against tough opponents. It does solid damage, it looks cool with electricity crackling along the blade, and it ties into the DLC's story about a military simulation. Jingwei's shock sword is one of the first DLC-exclusive uniques, setting a precedent that every expansion would add new weapons to chase. It's powerful, it's unique to the DLC, and it gives players a reason to engage with the extra content. The Pit DLC brought Steel Knuckles, a meaner version of Brass Knuckles. They do more damage, they look more brutal, and they're hidden in one of the game's darkest expansions. The Pit is about slavery and moral ambiguity, and finding upgraded Knuckles in that environment feels appropriate. Steel Knuckles aren't flashy, but they're functional and thematic. They fit the world they're found in, and that's what makes them work. Colonel Autumn's 10mm pistol drops during the main quest, specifically during the Waters of Life. This is the pistol carried by one of the game's main antagonists, and killing him or taking it off his body feels significant. The gun itself has better stats than a regular 10mm, and it's suppressed, making it perfect for stealth builds. Taking Autumn's weapon after he tries to kill you is satisfying in a way that finding a random unique in a locker isn't. The context matters. This is a trophy, proof that you survived and came out on top. Fox's super sledge is unique because it's a gift from your super mutant companion. Fox hands you his personal sledgehammer after you rescue him, and it's one of the best melee weapons in the game. It does massive damage, it has a unique skin, and it represents the bond you've built with one of the game's most memorable characters. This isn't loot. It's a gesture of friendship in a world where friendship is rare. Fox's super sledge matters because of who gave it to you and why. Fallout 3 proved Bethesda could make Fallout work in 3D, but could they make it work narratively? That question went to Obsidian, the studio made of original Fallout developers. They had 18 months to prove they could do better, and weapon design became their main argument. If Fallout 3 was a playground, New Vegas turned it into an armory with a thesis statement. Level 5. Mojave Legends. Maria is Benny's personal 9mm pistol, and it's engraved with the Virgin Mary. Benny shoots you in the head with this gun during the opening cinematic, and getting it back is one of the most satisfying moments in the game. You can kill Benny and loot it, or you can spare him and get it through other means. Either way, holding Maria feels like closure. This is the gun that started your journey, and now it's yours. The engravings, the name, the backstory, everything about Maria makes it iconic. It's not the strongest pistol in the game, but it doesn't need to be. The emotional weight is enough. Lucky is a .357 Magnum revolver that's hidden in a safe at the Bison Steve Hotel. Finding it requires lockpicking or getting a key, and the gun itself is beautiful. It has a higher critical hit chance than a regular revolver, and it's perfect for VATS-based crit builds. The name Lucky fits because this gun turns you into a gambling god. Every shot feels like it's rolling dice, and when you crit, you know you just hit the jackpot. Lucky is one of those weapons that feels good to use, and New Vegas is full of them. The Survivalist's Rifle comes from the Honest Hearts DLC, and it's tied to one of the saddest stories in the game. You find it in caves scattered across Zion Canyon, along with diary entries from a pre-war soldier who survived the bombs and lived alone in the wilderness for decades. By the time you find his rifle, he's long dead, and the weapon is all that's left of him. The rifle itself is excellent, basically a scope battle rifle with high damage and accuracy. But every time you use it, you think about the man who carried it before you. The Survivalist's Rifle isn't just a weapon, it's a memorial. Fist of Rar is crafted from a Deathclaw talon, specifically the talon of a legendary Deathclaw named Rar. You have to kill this monster in the Lonesome Road DLC, and it's one of the toughest fights in the game. Once you take the talon, you can craft it into a power fist that does absurd damage. The name Fist of Rar is silly, but the weapon itself is terrifying. You're literally punching people with a dinosaur's claw. It's brutal, it's effective, and it's a trophy that proves you beat one of the hardest bosses in New Vegas. Love and Hate are 2 power fists engraved with those exact words, and you find them in gang camps. The names are simple, the design is iconic, and they do solid damage for unarmed builds. Love and Hate represent the duality of violence in the wasteland. Sometimes you're fighting for love, to protect the people you care about. Other times you're fighting out of pure hate, because the world has wronged you and you want revenge. These weapons capture that philosophy in a way that's almost poetic. The golden gloves are gold-plated boxing gloves from Mr. House's Lucky 38, and they're exactly what they sound like. Flashy, expensive, and effective. You find them in House's penthouse, and they're a symbol of his wealth and power. Using the golden gloves feels like flexing on the wasteland. You're not just punching people, you're punching them with style, with class, with gold-plated knuckles that probably cost more than an entire settlement. The golden gloves are absurd, and that's why they're great. The All-American is a marksman carbine hidden in Vault 22, and it's one of the best semi-auto rifles in the game. It has solid damage, excellent accuracy, and it looks amazing. The name is a patriotic nod, and finding it requires navigating one of the creepiest vaults in New Vegas. Vault 22 is full of mutant plants and spore carriers, and the All-American is your reward for surviving the horror show. This weapon is beloved by the community because it's practical, powerful, and perfect for almost any build. Medicine Stick is a brush gun that combines hunting rifle stats with cowboy aesthetics. It does massive damage per shot, it looks like something out of a western, and it's perfect for players who want to roleplay as a wasteland cowboy. You buy it from the gun runners, which means you need caps, but the investment is worth it. Medicine Stick hits like a train, and every shot feels satisfying. Notice the pattern? Every weapon in New Vegas has context. Maria is revenge. The survivalist's rifle is grief. Medicine Stick is power fantasy. This wasn't accidental. Obsidian understood something Bethesda missed. Weapons don't matter because of their stats. They matter because of their stories. But Bethesda was about to push back hard with Fallout 4. The recoil, the sound, the damage numbers, everything about this gun screams power. That gun is a direct reference to Blade Runner, a 2-3 pistol that looks exactly like Deckard's sidearm. Fans of the movie lose their minds when they find this, and even people who don't get the reference love it because it's just a really good pistol. It uses 2-3 ammo, it has decent damage, and it's sold by a vendor in Novak. That gun is accessible, powerful, and iconic. It's one of those weapons that shows up in every New Vegas playthrough because it's just that good. The AER-14 prototype is a laser rifle hidden in Vault 22, the same vault as the All-American. This energy weapon outdamages its base version, and it's perfect for energy weapon builds. Finding it requires exploring one of the game's most dangerous locations, and the payoff is a rifle that melts enemies. The AER-14 prototype is simple. It's a better laser rifle. That's it. But sometimes simple is exactly what you need. The Tesla Beaten prototype is a Brotherhood Tesla cannon that zaps robots into scrap. You find it at the crashed Vertibird site near the Brotherhood bunker, and it's one of the best anti-robot weapons in the game. Robots are everywhere in New Vegas, from Securitrons to Sentry bots, and the Tesla Beaten turns them into junk. It's practical, it's faction-tied, and it rewards you for engaging with the Brotherhood story. Mercy is a unique grenade launcher found in Deadwind Cavern, looted from a dead Brotherhood of Steel Paladin, and it's perfect for explosive builds. It does high damage, it's relatively easy to get, and it turns you into a walking artillery platform. Mercy is straightforward. You point it at enemies, you pull the trigger, they explode. Sometimes that's all you need in a weapon. Thump Thump is another grenade launcher, but this one fires in a high arc, perfect for lobbing death over cover. You buy it from the Boomers, a faction obsessed with explosives, and it fits their theme perfectly. Thump Thump is fun to use because it changes how you approach combat. You're not shooting directly at enemies, you're calculating arcs, bouncing grenades around corners, and turning the battlefield into a minefield. Knock Knock is a fire axe with bonus crit damage, and you find it in the Searchlight Fire Station. The name is a joke. The weapon is deadly, and it's perfect for melee builds. Knock Knock does exactly what it says. You knock on death's door, and when it opens, you bury an axe in its face. Pushy is a displacer glove that knocks enemies back, and you find it in a cave. The knockback effect is hilarious and practical, turning tough enemies into ragdolls. Pushy is one of those weapons that feels good to use because the feedback is immediate and satisfying. You punch someone, they fly backward. You laugh, simple, effective, and fun. The Q-35 Matter Modulator is a plasma rifle that sets things on fire, and you find it in the Repcon facility. It does solid damage, it has a unique effect, and it's tied to one of the game's most memorable locations. The Q-35 is powerful enough to carry you through the endgame, and it looks cool doing it. Paciencia is a hunting rifle that crits like crazy, and you buy it from the gun runners. The name means patience in Spanish, which is fitting because this rifle rewards careful, precise shots. Paciencia is a sniper's dream, turning headshots into instant kills and making long-range combat feel effortless. Fallout 4 faced an impossible task. New Vegas perfected story-driven unique weapons. How do you top perfection? Bethesda's answer was to radically change the system entirely. Instead of dozens of named uniques, they added hundreds of randomized legendaries. The fanbase is still fighting about whether this was genius or betrayal, but the named uniques that survived, they had to fight harder to matter. Level 6. Iconic weapons. Kellogg's pistol is the flagship unique weapon of Fallout 4. You get it during the Reunions quest after hunting down the man who killed your spouse and kidnapped your son. The Relentless effect refills your action points on critical hits, making it a VATS monster. Every crit gives you more AP, which lets you chain more crits, which gives you more AP. Kellogg's pistol turns VATS from a tactical option into a killing spree. And this is where Fallout 4's philosophy shows. Kellogg's pistol isn't just good, it's mechanically distinct, because now it has to compete with random legendary drops that could theoretically be stronger. Every name unique in Fallout 4 had to justify its existence against a slot machine of possibilities. The gun isn't just strong, it's emotionally charged. This is the weapon of the man who destroyed your family, and now it's yours. That weight makes every shot feel personal. Overseer's Guardian is a combat rifle sold at Vault 81, and it shoots 2 bullets per shot. This effect essentially doubles your damage output, making it one of the strongest rifles in the game. The catch is you have to find Vault 81 and do enough quests to earn access to the vendor. Once you buy it, though, the Commonwealth becomes a shooting gallery. Overseer's Guardian is practical, powerful, and accessible. It's the kind of weapon that defines a playthrough. The Deliverer is a 10mm pistol from the Railroad, silenced and perfect for stealth builds. You get it during the Tradecraft quest, and it becomes your best friend if you're playing sneaky. The Deliverer has a unique perk that reduces AP cost and VATS, letting you fire more shots per turn. Combined with a suppressor, it's the perfect assassination tool. You sneak, you shoot, enemies die, and nobody knows you were there. The Deliverer is efficient, quiet, and deadly. Spray and Pray is an explosive submachine gun sold by a wandering trader named Cricket. Every bullet explodes on impact, turning the SMG into a room-clearing nightmare. The explosions deal area damage, which means you can hurt yourself if you're too close, but the sheer destruction is worth the risk. Spray and Pray is chaos incarnate. You hold down the trigger, bullets spray everywhere, everything explodes, and when the smoke clears, you're the only thing left standing. Big Boy is a fat man that fires 2 mini nukes instead of 1. You buy it from a vendor in Diamond City, and the first time you fire it, you understand why it's called Big Boy. 2 mini nukes hit the target area, doubling the nuclear devastation. It's impractical, it's overkill, and it's absolutely hilarious. Big Boy is the kind of weapon you use when you want to send a message. That message is, everything dies. The Broadsider is a handheld naval cannon found on the USS Constitution, a ship stuck on top of a building because Fallout logic. You help robot sailors get their ship flying again, and they reward you with this absurd weapon. The Broadsider fires cannonballs, and while it's not the strongest heavy weapon, it's one of the coolest. The sound design, the visual effect, the sheer ridiculousness of carrying a naval cannon on your back, it all works. The Broadsider is style over substance, and that's fine. The Cryolator is locked in Vault 111, your starting vault, and you need to either max out lockpicking or bring Dogmeat back later to grab it. This weapon freezes enemies solid, letting you shatter them like ice sculptures. The Cryolator changes how you fight, because frozen enemies are helpless. You freeze them, you switch to a melee weapon, you shatter them. It's brutal, it's efficient, and it's incredibly satisfying. The Cryolator is one of those weapons that makes you feel powerful in a very specific way. The Alien Blaster Pistol returns yet again, this time as a random encounter weapon. You find a crashed UFO, follow a blood trail, and discover an alien corpse with the blaster nearby. It uses fusion cells now instead of alien ammo, which makes it way more practical. The damage is excellent, and it's still one of the coolest weapons in the game. The Alien Blaster is a Fallout tradition at this point, showing up in almost every game as a reward for exploring the weird corners of the map. Righteous Authority is a laser rifle from the Brotherhood that fills your critical meter faster on headshots. You get it during the Call to Arms quest, and it becomes a staple for energy weapon builds. The effect rewards accuracy, turning every headshot into progress toward your next guaranteed crit. Righteous Authority isn't the strongest laser rifle, but it's one of the most useful because it synergizes with VATS perks. Experiment 18A is a plasma rifle that fires faster than normal, hidden in a university lab. The faster fire rate means more damage per second, which is always good. You find it in the College Square station, and while it's easy to miss, it's worth hunting down if you're running an energy weapon build. Experiment 18A is simple. It's a better plasma rifle. That's the pitch. And then came the change I promised you at the start. Every Fallout game had one thing in common. You were alone in the wasteland. The unique weapons were yours. Nobody else had them. Fallout 76 asked a question that seemed impossible. How do you make one-of-a-kind weapons in a game with thousands of players? The answer would either save or destroy 20 years of tradition. Level 7. Appellation Rewards. An online multiplayer Fallout sounds like a nightmare on paper. How is a weapon unique if everyone can get it? Bethesda's solution was controversial. They made unique weapons into quest rewards everyone could earn, then flooded the game with randomized legendaries to create actual uniqueness. It was the opposite of Fallout 1's philosophy. Instead of one alien blaster in the world, there were thousands. But your legendary role might be the only one like it. Some players called it dilution. Others called it evolution. Instead of quest rewards from NPCs, most uniques came from events, seasonal content, and DLC updates. The game launched rough, but over time Bethesda added enough content to make chasing these weapons worthwhile. The format changed, but the idea stayed the same. Unique weapons were still rewards for engaging with content. Somerset Special is a 44 pistol that ignores 50% of enemy armor, handed out during a quest. Armor penetration is massive in Fallout 76, because enemies scale with your level, and cutting through half their armor means you're doing real damage. Somerset Special is practical, it's effective, and it's tied to the main storyline. You don't have to hunt for it. You earn it by progressing. Voice of Set is an energy pistol from the Mistress of Mystery storyline, dealing extra damage to robots. Fallout 76 has robots everywhere, from Protectrons to Assaultrons, and Voice of Set turns them into scrap. The Mistress of Mystery questline is one of the best in the game, and the weapon is a fitting reward. It's powerful, it's thematic, and it ties into pre-war lore about comic book heroes. All Rise is a super sledge you get from the mayor for a day quest, and it weighs 90% less than normal. Weight reduction is huge in Fallout 76 because carry capacity is always a problem, and a lightweight super sledge means you can carry more loot. All Rise does solid damage, it's easy to get, and it's perfect for melee builds that don't want to sacrifice inventory space. The Fixer is a combat rifle with stealth bonuses that became meta in PvP. You get the plan from encrypted events, and once you craft it, you become an invisible death machine. The Fixer has faster sneaking speed, better stealth detection, and solid damage. It's the go-to weapon for stealth builds in Fallout 76, and it dominated the meta for months after release. Bethesda eventually nerfed it, but it's still strong. Rose's Syringer and Vox Syringer are exotic syringe guns from the Expeditions update, firing custom chems that debuff enemies. The syringes apply status effects like slow, weaken, or poison, turning these weapons into utility tools rather than pure damage dealers. Rose's Syringer and Vox Syringer are niche, but they're fun for support builds or players who want to experiment with different playstyles. The pumpkin grenade shows up during Halloween, exploding with candy and shrapnel. It's a joke weapon, but it's also surprisingly effective. The explosion does decent damage, and the candy adds to the absurdity. The pumpkin grenade is pure Fallout humor, reminding you that even in a live service game, the series can still be goofy. Holy Fire is a cursed flamer introduced in the Locked and Loaded update. Cursed weapons deal high damage but break faster and have other debuffs. Holy Fire sets everything on fire, does absurd damage, but it also falls apart quickly. The trade-off is interesting. You get massive power, but you pay for it with durability. Holy Fire is high risk, high reward, and it's perfect for players who want to live dangerously. The Pyrolyzer is an energy rifle from the Tracking Unknowns quest, setting things on fire with every shot. The fire damage stacks, turning tough enemies into walking bonfires. The Pyrolyzer is solid for DPS builds, and it's tied to one of the more interesting questlines in Fallout 76. Elder's Mark is a cursed SMG that shreds enemies but drains your health. The damage is excellent, but the health drain means you're constantly chugging stimpaks. Elder's Mark is another high-risk weapon, and it's perfect for aggressive builds that want to trade health for kills. Blade of Bastet comes from the Mistress of Mystery questline, a melee weapon tied to pre-war comic lore. It does solid damage, it looks cool, and it's part of a full armor set. Blade of Bastet is thematic, it's functional, and it rewards players who complete one of the game's best side stories. So here's what changed forever. Fallout 1 through New Vegas said, unique weapons are rare artifacts you discover. Fallout 4 said, unique weapons compete with random chance. Fallout 76 said, unique weapons are templates, and the legendary system creates the real prizes. Level 1. Trash companies. Welcome to the absolute bottom tier of Fallout's corporate landscape, where companies exist mostly as set dressing and flavor text. These are the brands you see on billboards, hear mentioned in holotapes, or find stamped on random junk littering the wasteland. Blamco is the perfect example here, basically the Kraft mac and cheese of the apocalypse. You'll find their packaged mac and cheese boxes everywhere from Fallout 3 onwards, providing a measly handful of hit points when consumed, but honestly, you're eating them more for the nostalgia than the healing. No quests, no lore revelations, just carbs in a box that somehow survived nuclear Armageddon better than most civilizations. These peripheral companies fill out the world, but here's the thing. Even these harmless brands tell you something dark about pre-war America. When your breakfast cereal is radioactive and your cleaning products are worthless junk, that's not accidental. That's an economy where safety regulations died decades before the bombs fell. And if companies at the bottom were already cutting corners this badly, imagine what the ones with actual power were doing. Spoiler, Level 2 tried to save people from nuclear war. The skeletons in their products tell you how that worked out. Level 2. Failed companies. Moving up a tier, we hit companies that actually have some personality and contribute meaningful items or locations, but still don't drive major storylines. These are the brands that make you go, oh yeah, I remember that place, instead of who. Pulowski Preservation Services deserves special mention for creating the most hilariously useless product in gaming history. Their preservation pods were basically phone booths marketed as budget nuclear shelters, costing only 500 caps compared to Vault-Tech's multi-million-dollar installations. The marketing promised nuclear protection on a budget, which technically wasn't false advertising since they did provide a budget, and they did exist during nuclear protection attempts. From a gameplay perspective, Pulowski pods occasionally contain minor loot and provide a tiny amount of cover during firefights, though their structural integrity is about as reliable as their nuclear protection claims. Some can be picked for locks worth 25 XP, and very rarely you'll find a cap stash or some chems inside. Vimpop shows up exclusively in Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, where they were basically Maine's answer to Nuka-Cola before getting sabotaged into obscurity. The Vimpop factory is a full location you can clear out, fight through rust devils and turrets, and learn about their doomed rivalry with the bigger brand. You can mix Vim flavors using a special machine, creating Vim Captain's Blend, which provides 50 HP, 10 AP, and removes 400 rads, making it one of the better consumables in the game. Hornwright Industrial Mining dominates Fallout 76's Appalachia with their automated mining operations that definitely didn't cause any catastrophic problems. Their auto miners are these massive drilling robots that you can requisition and deploy to gather resources, functioning as mobile mineral extractors with a carry weight of 500 pounds. The Hornwright estate is a massive mansion that showcases exactly how rich mining executives got while their workers struggled. So Level 2 companies tried to help, but their products were either death traps, regional failures, or automation disasters that cost people their jobs. Incompetence mixed with greed. But here's where it gets interesting. These failures, they were accidents. The companies at Level 3 knew exactly what they were building. Chrysalis put nuclear bombs in every car. Sunset Sarsaparilla got crushed by corporate warfare. And when we talk about foot soldiers, we're talking about companies that armed the wasteland before it even became a wasteland. They flesh out regional differences and show that not every corporation operated nationwide. Some were regional powers that got overshadowed by the true giants. Level 3. Useful companies. Now we're getting into companies that actually matter to gameplay and world building, even if they're not headlining major storylines. These corporations supply essential gear, create iconic locations, or introduce concepts that stick with you. Chrysalis Motors deserves way more credit for shaping how the wasteland looks and functions. They created those bulky atomic-powered cars that explode like mini-nukes when you shoot them, dealing around 150-200 damage in a significant blast radius. This is both incredibly convenient for combat and absolutely insane from an engineering perspective. Imagine designing a civilian vehicle where the fuel tank detonates with nuclear force if ruptured. The Corvega is their flagship model, a massive sedan that defined pre-war automotive design with its chrome fins and completely impractical dimensions. Sunset Sarsaparilla is the western underdog to Nuka-Cola's corporate giant, showing up mainly in New Vegas with an entire treasure hunt questline. The Legend of the Star Quest has you collecting star bottle caps, the rare promotional items that Sunset Sarsaparilla distributed as a marketing gimmick. You need to find all the star caps and decode the trail of clues left by the promotional campaign. The payoff is meeting Festus, the cowboy robot mascot, and finding Alan Marks, the guy who won the original contest and murdered the other winners to steal their prizes. It's a brilliantly dark story about how corporate promotions can inspire actual murder. The prize itself is incredibly underwhelming, just some caps and a unique Sunset Sarsaparilla deputy badge, which somehow feels perfectly Fallout. Nuka-Cola eventually acquired Sunset Sarsaparilla in 2058, crushing the regional competition through sheer market dominance. This mirrors real-world beverage industry consolidation, where local brands get swallowed by international giants. These foot soldier companies gave you the cars you explode for combat, the drinks you chug for healing, and the facilities you raid for loot. Essential, practical, profitable. But they they were still just suppliers. Level 4 is where companies stopped making products and started playing God, and their specialty was creating things that should never have existed in the first place. Every time you see a rusted car or find a bottle of Sunset Sarsaparilla, these companies are contributing to your experience even if they're not driving the main plot forward. Level 4. Dangerous companies. Here's where we find companies that carved out specific niches and became absolutely dominant in their fields, creating iconic products or horrors that define entire gameplay systems. These aren't generalists. They're the best or worst at one particular thing. ArcJet Systems only appears in Fallout 4 but makes a hell of an impression with their aerospace facility where you help the Brotherhood of Steel grab a deep-range transmitter. They were working on the Mars Shot project, humanity's attempt to establish a Mars colony before nuclear war made Earth the red planet instead. Their facility features a working rocket engine test chamber that you actually activate during the quest, which is one of the cooler set pieces in the game. Repcon Aerospace takes the space race angle even further in New Vegas, giving you an entire facility full of feral ghouls and the Come Fly With Me quest to help non-feral ghouls literally launch themselves into space. Before Robco bought them out in 2076, they were major players in rocket propulsion and plasma weapons technology. The hostile takeover by Robert House was aggressive even by his standards, using financial warfare to absorb a competitor. Big MT is where Fallout goes full mad science horror show in the Old World Blues DLC for New Vegas. This think tank created nightmare fuel like cazadores, those flying murder wasps that everyone absolutely despises with their 4 attacks per second and incredibly potent poison. Cazadores deal about 10 damage per sting, but apply a poison DOT effect that ticks for additional damage over time, making them disproportionately dangerous. Big MT's think tank scientists were so unethical, they literally removed their own brains and transferred consciousness into floating robot containers, becoming the think tank that runs the facility. This actually made them worse because they lost perspective on human limitations and just kept experimenting. Dr. Mobius, the villain of Old World Blues, is actually trying to contain them by keeping everyone trapped in the crater. Let me connect the dots here. Big MT created Cazadores and the Cloud as private corporate research. ArcJet covered up fatal accidents for Mars colonization contracts. Repcon caused radiation spills that created ghouls. These aren't rogue scientists in basements. These are companies with massive facilities, government contracts, and zero oversight, which means Level 5 isn't just bigger versions of this. Level 5 is where this became national policy, and one company at Level 5 is directly responsible for super mutants existing at all. Every super mutant you've ever fought, from the dumb brutes to the behemoths to the Master's Army, traces back to one corporation's military contract. And somehow, they're still not the worst company in Fallout. The specialists went all in on mad science, but here's the crucial difference. Big MT, ArcJet, Repcon were contractors. They had clients. Level 5 companies weren't just contractors. They were the military-industrial complex itself, so deeply fused with the government that calling them companies is almost misleading. They were infrastructure. They were policy. And their mistakes didn't just affect one region. They reshaped the entire wasteland, creating weapons and monsters that players still complain about years later. Level 5. Military companies. Welcome to the big leagues where companies had massive influence over pre-war society, and their legacies still shape major questlines centuries later. These corporations were powerful enough to affect government policy, and their technology remains top tier. Poseidon Energy was basically the pre-war energy cartel, controlling everything from oil rigs to solar plants to experimental ultrasite mining in Appalachia. The Enclave used their oil rig platform as their base of operations, showing how deeply interconnected corporate and government interests had become. That oil rig, designated Control Station Enclave, contained full military facilities, housing, and research labs. Basically, a floating city. Helios 1 in New Vegas is their most visible legacy, a massive concentrated solar power plant that can be weaponized into a death ray called Archimedes 2. The facility uses an array of mirrors to concentrate sunlight onto a central tower, generating megawatts of power. If you complete the quest, That Lucky Old Sun, and reroute power to Archimedes, you get an orbital strike weapon that calls down a focused solar beam dealing massive damage in a target area. Their subsidiaries included Poseidon Oil and Poseidon Gasoline, vertical integration that gave them control over the entire energy supply chain. This monopolistic structure let them manipulate prices and policy, essentially holding the economy hostage. The company had executive connections to the Enclave, with high-level employees receiving preferential treatment for shelter access. West Tech is directly responsible for super mutants, which makes them arguably the most consequential company in Fallout history by body count alone. They developed the forced evolutionary virus, originally called the Pan-Immunity Virion Project, meant to create disease-resistant super soldiers. The project started in 2076 at the West Tech Research Facility in Southern California, with military funding and oversight. Stop and think about what we just learned. West Tech created the FEV that makes super mutants, but the virus was a military bioweapons contract, which means the government paid them to develop it. The experiments that destroyed countless lives were taxpayer-funded. This is the level where we stop talking about corporate greed and start talking about systemic corruption. When your government is paying companies to create monsters, the distinction between public and private sector becomes meaningless. And speaking of that blurred line, one Level 5 company literally provided the base for the Enclave, the shadow government that survived the war. Poseidon Energy's oil rig became Control Station Enclave, making them complicit in everything that faction ever did. West also developed the T-51 Power Armor series, which became the iconic armor of the Fallout series. The T-51B model specifically offers a 1000 defense rating in Fallout 4, with excellent ballistic and energy resistance. It requires fusion cores for operation, draining approximately 1 core per 20 minutes of use. The armor's servo-assisted strength enhancement lets users carry hundreds of pounds of equipment without encumbrance. General Atomics International put a robot in every home with their Mr. Handy series, creating those friendly floating butler bots that somehow survived 2 centuries. The basic Mr. Handy model has around 110 HP and uses a combination of saw blades and flamethrowers for weapons, making them surprisingly dangerous if hostile. They run on internal fusion reactors that apparently last centuries with minimal maintenance. Field marshals created super mutants, armed every robot in America, and powered civilization. That sounds like the top tier, right? How do you get more powerful than literally creating the wasteland's most iconic threat? Here's how. Level 6 companies didn't just shape pre-war America. They are pre-war America. Their technology is your game interface. Their products are your currency. And one man turned his Level 6 company into a dictatorship that survived 200 years by predicting the exact date of nuclear war, which raises an uncomfortable question. If Robert House could predict when the bombs would fall, what did the company at Level 7 know? And why were they so confident they'd survive it? They weren't just making products, they were defining how civilization functioned. Level 6, mega companies. Only 3 companies make it to this tier. The absolute titans that defined pre-war America, and whose influence reaches into every corner of every Fallout game. You literally cannot play this series without interacting with their legacies constantly. Robco Industries was Robert House's baby, the robotics and software monopoly that put terminals everywhere and manufactured the Pip-Boy devices that serve as your literal game interface. The company was founded in 2042 and grew through aggressive acquisitions, absorbing competitors until Robco dominated the market. House was such a ruthless businessman, he orchestrated hostile takeovers while developing revolutionary technology simultaneously. The unified operating system that Robco created runs on basically every computer terminal in the wasteland, from abandoned offices to military installations. This standardization means you can hack almost any terminal with the same skills, which makes sense from a corporate monopoly perspective. In reality, this would be a massive security vulnerability, but it makes for consistent gameplay mechanics. House's most impressive achievement was predicting the Great War's exact date and preparing accordingly. He calculated October 23, 2077 as the likely nuclear exchange date and prepared his defense systems, though they came online 24 hours late due to sabotage. After the war, he kept himself alive for over 200 years using advanced medical technology, running New Vegas from his Lucky 38 casino tower as an absolute monarch. The Pip-Boy is Robco's most ubiquitous product, the personal information processor that every Vault Dweller receives. The Pip-Boy 3000 model in Fallout 3 and 4 displays your stats, inventory, map, and radio functions on a cathode ray tube screen. It's supposedly built to last 100 years, but many units remain functional after 200, showing incredible build quality. The device interfaces with basically all pre-war technology via standardized ports. Technical specs on the Pip-Boy indicate it uses a custom operating system with modular software for different applications. The VATS targeting system is either a Pip-Boy feature or integrated with the user's perception. The lore is deliberately vague on this. Either way, it provides combat advantages by slowing time and calculating hit percentages on targeted body parts. Robco's Stealth Boy technology enables personal invisibility through a wrist-mounted field generator. The Stealth Boy 3001 model generates a modulating field that bends light around the user for roughly 2 minutes per charge. In gameplay terms, this makes you virtually undetectable while active, letting you bypass combat entirely or get critical sneak attack bonuses. The downside is limited duration and the fact that they're rare consumable items. The company's robot lineup includes Protectrons, those boxy security robots found everywhere. A basic Protectron has around 150 HP, uses laser weapons, and can be reprogrammed via nearby terminals. Their modular design allows for variants like construction Protectrons with grippers or police Protectrons with sirens. The standardized platform made them ubiquitous for security applications. iBots are Robco's recon drones, floating spheres with sensor arrays and speakers. EDE in New Vegas is a modified iBot with enhanced capabilities, and one of the best companion perks in the game, providing accuracy and damage bonuses. Standard iBots have minimal combat capability, but excel at surveillance and broadcasting messages. Sentry bots represent Robco's heavy combat platform, Massive robots with galling lasers, missile launchers, and heavy armor plating. These things have 1000 plus HP in Fallout 4 and can shred you in seconds with sustained fire. The minigun arm alone dishes out hundreds of damage per second, making sentry bots legitimate boss-tier enemies. Robert House calculated October 23, 2077 as the nuclear exchange date with such precision that he almost saved New Vegas entirely. His defenses came online 24 hours late due to sabotage, but think about what that means. He knew, he prepared. He survived as a techno-dictator for 2 centuries because he saw it coming. Now here's the question that should terrify you. If House could predict the war, did other executives know too? And if they knew, why didn't they stop it? House's management of New Vegas after the war shows his vision for the future, a technocratic autocracy where he controls everything through robot armies and calculated deals. He upgraded the Securitron army with the Mark II OS, giving them grenade launchers, rapid-fire Gatling lasers, and missile racks. This transforms them from police bots into military units capable of overwhelming NCR or Legion forces. Nuka-Cola Corporation achieved what every beverage company dreams of, becoming so ubiquitous that their product survives as currency and addiction 200 years later. John Caleb Bradburton founded the company in 2044, building it into a soft drink empire that rivaled Coca-Cola's real-world dominance. The company's secret formula included 17 fruit flavors and was so closely guarded that only Bradburton knew the complete recipe. The standard Nuka-Cola restores 20 HP, 10 AP, and adds 5 rads. These stats make it a decent healing item early game, though the radiation accumulation becomes problematic. The bottles are everywhere because Nuka-Cola saturated the market through aggressive distribution deals and vending machine placement. You find bottles in homes, offices, military bases, literally everywhere people existed. Nuka-Cola Cherry adds a berry twist and provides slightly better stats, while Nuka-Cola Grape has its own flavor profile. The company constantly released new variants to maintain consumer interest and drive sales. This mirrors real-world beverage industry tactics where artificial scarcity and limited releases create demand. Nuka-Cola Quantum is the crown jewel, the glowing blue radioactive variant that Bradburton developed shortly before the war. Quantum contains a strontium-90 isotope that makes it glow and provides an energy boost, but also delivers 10 rads per bottle. In Fallout 4, it restores 50 HP and 20 AP, but those 10 rads add up fast. The glow is iconic enough that Quantum bottles are collectible quest items and crafting components. There's actually a contradiction in the timeline about when Quantum released. Some sources say it launched 3 years before the war, others suggest it was still in limited test markets when the bombs fell. This explains why Quantum is relatively rare compared to regular Nuka-Cola, though not as rare as it should be given its supposed limited release. Nuka World is the company's magnum opus, a massive amusement park in Massachusetts featuring themed zones, rides, and attractions all celebrating Nuka-Cola. The park includes Galactic Zone with space themes, Dry Rock Gulch with western themes, Safari Adventure, and Kitty Kingdom. Each zone has its own rides, shops, and environmental storytelling about pre-war consumer culture. The Nuka World DLC in Fallout 4 lets you explore this corporate monument to excess, now overrun by raiders divided into 3 gangs. The park features the Quantum Power Armor paint job, unique weapons like the Thirst Zapper, and bottles of every Nuka variant imaginable. It's basically Disney World filtered through Fallout's satirical lens, showing how corporations created entertainment empires. Bradburton himself ended up as a preserved head in a hidden vault beneath the park, kept alive by machines for 200 years. He begs you to kill him, having spent 2 centuries conscious but immobile, regretting his deal with the government for immortality. It's a perfectly dark ending for a character who represents corporate ambition, achieving his dream, and discovering it was a nightmare. Project Cobalt was Nuka-Cola's secret military contract, developing the Nuka Nuke and other weaponized applications of their products. This shows how deeply civilian corporations integrated with military R&D, using beverage chemistry knowledge for weapons development. The Nuka Grenade is a craftable weapon that deals significant explosive and radiation damage. The Nuka-Cola Corporation represents consumerism taken to its absolute extreme, where marketing matters more than safety and addiction is just good business strategy. The company hired researchers to study consumer behavior, conducted taste tests, and refined their formula to maximize repeat purchases. This is standard corporate practice pushed into satirical territory. Finding a Nuka-Cola Quantum feels special because Bethesda made these drinks function as collectibles beyond healing items. Various quests require specific Nuka variants. Vendors pay premium prices for rare bottles, and some recipes need specific flavors. This transforms random loot into treasured finds, making exploration rewarding. Robco controlled technology through monopoly. Nuka-Cola controlled culture through addiction. Both companies made pre-war America dependent on their products, and both survived the apocalypse through sheer market saturation. But here's what separates level 6 from level 7. Robco and Nuka-Cola needed the world to survive because they needed customers. Level 7 didn't need customers. They needed test subjects. And when you're running experiments that require societal collapse, waiting for the apocalypse becomes bad for business. So why wait, every hacked terminal reinforces Robco's monopoly, every Nuka-Cola bottle reminds you of pre-war consumer culture. Level 7? God companies. Level 7 is Vault-Tec Corporation, and before I explain why they're the apex predator of corporate evil, let me answer the question we never did from the beginning. Did Vault-Tec start the nuclear war? The TV series gives us executive Barb Howard, literally proposing it in a boardroom meeting. Her exact pitch was that Vault-Tec could be the last people in America, maybe the world, and monopolize Reconstruction. She wasn't waiting for the apocalypse. She was scheduling it. Now, whether that's show canon, game canon, or both, remains deliberately ambiguous. But here's what's not ambiguous. Everything else, they did. Vault-Tec Corporation isn't just the most important pre-war company. It's the foundational pillar that the entire Fallout franchise is built upon. Vault-Tec won the Project Safehouse contract in 2054 to build 122 nuclear shelters, and then weaponized that responsibility into the most disturbing social experiments imaginable. The contract was worth hundreds of billions of dollars, with individual vaults costing astronomical amounts. Vault 13 alone cost $645 billion according to some estimates, though inflation and pre-war economic chaos make these numbers somewhat meaningless. Only 17 were actual control vaults meant to legitimately save people and serve as baseline data. The rest were psychological torture chambers disguised as salvation, each designed to test different variables. Vault 106 pumped psychoactive drugs into the air supply 5 days after sealing, driving residents insane to study mental breakdown under isolation. Vault 43 put 20 men, 10 women, and 1 panther together just to see what would happen, which is so deliberately cruel it borders on parody. Vault 11 made residents vote annually to sacrifice someone or everyone dies, creating a democracy-based death cult. This went on for years, until only 5 residents remained and chose to die rather than continue. Except the Vault didn't actually kill them, because the real experiment was seeing if they'd rebel. Vault 92 was designed to create super soldiers through subliminal messaging and music, which predictably went wrong. Vault 108 cloned a guy named Gary hundreds of times, and all the clones could only say Gary. The technical specifications of vaults are actually impressive despite the horrific experiments. Each vault features reinforced lid casing capable of withstanding direct nuclear strikes, geothermal power systems that function indefinitely, water purification systems, and hydroponics farms for food production. The average vault can sustain roughly 1,000 residents for at least 10 years, with control vaults designed for indefinite operation. Vault doors weigh tons and use massive gear mechanisms for sealing, creating the iconic entrance aesthetic. The door mechanics provide radiation shielding and security against external threats, though internal threats are where things get messy. Some vaults have external controls, others can only be opened from inside, and several have time locks preventing early exit. The GECK, or Garden of Eden Creation Kit, was Vault-Tec's terraforming device meant to help survivors rebuild civilization. Technical documentation describes it as containing seed stocks, soil bacteria, fertilizer, and construction materials. In gameplay, it's usually a quest MacGuffin, but in Fallout 2, you actually use one to purify Project Enclave's water supply, though this might be non-canonical now. The lore around whether Vault-Tec actually started the Great War gets strongly hinted at in the TV series. Executive Barb Howard proposed starting nuclear war themselves because waiting for inevitable Armageddon was bad for quarterly profits. She literally said they could be the last people in America, maybe the world, and monopolize Reconstruction. That's capitalism so evil it loops back around to being impressive in its audacity. The Enclave's involvement with Vault-Tec is extensively documented, with government officials having access to Vault data and using it for their own continuity of government plans. Many high-ranking executives and government officials received guaranteed Vault spots or Enclave placement, showing the corruption at society's highest levels. Every single Fallout game starts because of Vault-Tec. Whether you're leaving Vault 13 searching for a water chip in Fallout 1, escaping Vault 101's despotic overseer in Fallout 3, or discovering your spouse was murdered while you were frozen in Vault 111 in Fallout 4. New Vegas starts slightly differently since the courier isn't a Vault dweller, but Vault technology and Vault-Tec's legacy still permeates the game. The Pip-Boy you use as your interface was contracted through Robco, but branded as Vault-Tec equipment, making it the most intimate way the corporation touches gameplay. Every time you check your stats, manage inventory, or use VATs, you're interfacing with Vault-Tec's vision of information management. Level 1, Curiosity Mysteries. On Level 1, we're exploring a mystery that tickles players' curiosity and leads many of us to keep a closer eye on the Commonwealth's coastline. The Fallout franchise depicts many strange and mutated creatures, ranging from rad roaches to centaurs, but have you ever wondered what abominations would take shape in the oceans of the post-apocalyptic setting? While playing Fallout 4, when walking through Bunker Hill, you can overhear 2 caravan guards having a conversation. One guard tells a story about the grandfather she got her rifle from, saying that he was a brave man who used to earn a living gathering mirelurk eggs by the beach. This was until he went out collecting mirelurk eggs on a foggy day, when he heard something massive in the ocean. Let's Take a moment to consider this. Her grandfather must have been an experienced survival expert who would have come across all kinds of monstrosities. For something to scare him, it must have truly been a sight to behold. This sound stunned him. He knew he had to see it to make sense of the situation. That's when her grandfather spotted the outline of what he described as a behemoth massive and bigger than anything you or I will ever see. He called the creature Olpeg, a giant blue ghoul whale, though this could have been the Yangtze 31, a barely functional Chinese submarine now found stuck in the shallow waters just northeast of the four-lead fish packing plant. Shrouded by dense fog, it could have made the submarine appear larger due to an effect known as atmospheric perspective, with the fog reducing visibility. This causes objects to appear larger and less clear, so the fog could have made the Chinese submarine appear larger and bluer to a wastelander who would have no idea what a submarine was. However, could it be that there is actually a massive ghoul whale somewhere out there in the wasteland? After all, there are numerous locations where you can find the skeletal remains of whales. While walking the coast, we can spot the remains of sea life on debris and on land. This goes from smaller fish to larger mutated dolphins that were eventually labeled as dollfish in Fallout 76. Curious enough, the texture for the dollfish bodies are labeled whale in the Fallout 4 in-game files. We may never know the truth behind the legend of Olpeg, but I, for one, will be keeping an eye on the coast. Level 2. Hidden Easter eggs. If you think massive ghoul whales would be terrifying, what if I told you that there were giants roaming Far Harbor sometime in the past? You may have come across the story of Olpeg, but this next one is easier to miss, and that's why it's placed at level 2. Super mutants may not be the only large humanoids to have existed in the Fallout universe. If you travel southwest of Arcadia, just west of Old Pond House in Far Harbor, you will come across one of the various trapper outposts dotting the island. Beneath this trapper outpost, you can find the entrance to Pinecrest Caverns. Making your way through the cavern, you will find a skeleton, holding a human spine in one hand and a skull faceplate in the other. Upon further inspection, you will notice that the spine and skull are far smaller than it. That's because the skeleton is giant, much larger than a normal human. It's difficult to identify how old the giant could be, as remains can be preserved at varying rates as the caves are forming and may become exposed through cave forming processes. Sinkholes could also explain how the giant ended up there, though the cave could have been its shelter. It is also common for animals to seek refuge within caves and become trapped, with its carcass becoming part of the cave's wall in as little as several months. Could there be giant-sized humanoids lurking the wasteland, larger than super mutants? Or could this skeleton be all that's left of a prehistoric tribe of giants? Many American colonists believed there to have been a tribe of giants living in the Americas, until they were wiped out by rival tribes. This belief was widespread until 1934, when a curator of anthropology at the Smithsonian Institute, Alois Hrdlicka, rejected the claim. He blamed the misperception on amateur anthropologists being fooled by misinterpretations of the pre-colonial burial sites they studied. But could this be proof that a tribe of giants did indeed exist in the Fallout universe? Seems entirely possible with the skeletal evidence found within the walls of this cave. Giants can be found all throughout Bethesda's Elder Scrolls Skyrim, having sold over 60 million copies. It is one of the most popular video games of all time. So it's not hard to believe that on this level we can find another Easter egg with big implications related to the Elder Scrolls series. Exploring the Brothers Pridwin, you can find at the Biolab terminal called Hybrid Log, a series of terminal entries that read, "Had a bit of an unexpected find today. One of our field scribes brought a small root he found at the mouth of a river. Normally I wouldn't hold high hopes for such a small specimen, but the root is displaying chemical properties I've never seen before. I'm not sure anything will come of it, but it's certainly worth experimenting on." They would go on to refer to the plant as Experiment NRT-001, and the next log follows the experiments conducted on the samples taken. Experiment NRT-001, log A017. My new experimental root is doing surprisingly well. I've managed to graft pieces of it onto some hardier stock, and we've yielded a strong, leafy plant with thick roots. While I am uncertain of future applications for my new hybrid, I did a chemical test, and it seems safe to ingest. On a whim, I boiled the plant in some water and discovered that it makes an oddly good tea. There are 2 more logs that talk about the restorative properties that its root seems to have when consumed as a tea, making the scribe who discovered it feel reinvigorated and healthier than ever. The scribe would eventually discover that this plant has bioluminescent properties, renaming it Glowleaf. Upon further exploration, you can discover where they are cultivating the plant for further study, with plenty of specimens to be seen. Fans of the Elder Scrolls series will know right away what this plant is meant to be, with magic rituals, psychic powers, cult beliefs, and even spells becoming more and more common in the Fallout series. It leaves us with questions when Bethesda chooses to include a rare magical ingredient from Skyrim into the Fallout Fallout series and make it canon. This rare magical plant is Nirnroot, and it can be found throughout Tamriel. In the Elder Scrolls series, exploring its magical properties will identify its many fortifying attributes. If that's not enough, you can find samples of glow leaf at a water location reminiscent of where you'd find it in the Elder Scrolls series, by traveling due west of Eden Meadows Cinemas. Curious enough, this item has no addiction effects, and in survival mode, the glow leaf has no food value but will provide the sole survivor with a health buff without needing to be well fed. Though, in an interview in 2017, Pete Hines, Bethesda's now retired marketing vice president and head of PR, said that the inclusion of NRT-001 in Fallout 4 was always intended only as an Easter egg, and does not serve as evidence to indicate that Fallout and the Elder Scrolls were set in the same universe. It's easy to write off this mystery as busted after reading that, but I'll ask you, if it was only ever an Easter egg, then why did they include it in more than one location? Give it a completely canon story that includes multiple terminal entries and special properties in survival mode, with Nirnroots and giants. Is the setting of Fallout going to continue to explore magical topics that will naturally evolve into the Elder Scrolls series? Only time can tell. Level 3. Lore Enigmas. On Level 3, we're left with a mystery that involves a girl and her cat. To many people, their pets are their best friend. But would you know if your pet was recently replaced by a near-perfect spy? Here, you'll find questions that lead you to certain conclusions that you might not have known if events didn't trigger in just the right order. Eventually, you will come across Vault 81. As you enter Vault 81, you'll be met by a seemingly ordinary cat named Ashes, who dashes past you and into the wasteland. You'll be directed to speak to the owner of the cat, a young vault dweller named Aaron, who asks you to retrieve Ashes and bring him back home safely. You'd expect this to be an escort mission, but that's not how it pans out. You'll find Ashes east of the vault towards the Chestnut Hillock Reservoir, calmly sitting on the docks. All you have to do from that point on is tell the cat to return home, and it will immediately. You don't have to guide it at all. The cat seemingly understands the command it was given, and despite being far from home, returns ahead of the sole survivor. When you arrive back at Aaron, she will comment that she's so glad Ashes is back, but he acts like nothing happened. Could the Institute have replaced Ashes with a synth shortly after the cat escaped the confines of Vault 81? Now, this might seem like an odd assumption until you play through the game again, without retrieving Ashes after they escape. That's because when you arrive at the Institute during the main story mission, the nuclear option, an identical cat to Ashes will appear in the Institute that does not appear should the sole survivor tell Ashes to return home to Vault 81. There seems to be a precedent for the Institute to employ animal synths when they cannot replace humans, so it doesn't seem far-fetched for a cat to be a synth. Throughout the game, you can find birds everywhere in the Commonwealth, but did you know that you can find cameras that seem to be from a bird's eye view at the Synth Retention Bureau? Bird eyes can only get you so far. If the Institute needed to spy on a vault that does not accept outsiders regularly, spotting a cat running off would be an ideal opportunity to replace it with a synth cat and monitor the vault from a cat's eye view. After all, the Institute has eyes everywhere. Are you convinced that Ashes is a synth? If this is true, could this terminal be a hint left hidden by the developers that could change everything you know about the sole survivor? Level 4. Hidden Truths. On Level 4, you'll find questions unanswered, and may never be. It's left to speculation, but the mystery is a mystery nonetheless. Soon after the release of Fallout 4 more than a decade ago, Todd Howard stated in an interview that there was a game-changing piece of lore hidden in a terminal that nobody had found yet. For years, both players and modders have hunted high and low to this secret terminal. When interviewed, the now retired Pete Hines stated that nobody had found it yet. There are some players who feel that the secret terminal may have finally been uncovered. Though there have been no official statements that this is the terminal, players have reported finding a terminal in the Institute's synth production area, labeled Robotics Terminal 2C. On an entry titled Unique Project, you can find a message that reads, "In select Gen 3 units, the synthetic brain is indeed capable of accepting specific enhancements to the visual cortex, basal ganglia, and right parietal cortex. The result is substantially improved combat effectiveness due to two factors. 1. An increased understanding of weapon accuracy, to the extent that the combatant can actually visualize the percentage of effectively hitting targets, or smaller areas on those targets. 2. An altered sense of perception that mimics the effect of slowing, or even stopping, time. Recommend we commence surgery and field trials on appropriate operatives in the near future," leading to many players to believe that the sole survivor being a synth due to the entry's description being so similar to VATS. But could this be the same changing hidden terminal Pete Hines and Todd Howard both felt the need to comment on? This seems to be backed by Dima, the leader of the synth colony of Arcadia, and one of the two early prototype synths who appears in the Far Harbor during the DLC's main questline, Where You Belong. After Old Longfellow guides the sole survivor to Arcadia to search for Kasumi Nakano, the runaway daughter of wastelanders Kenji and Rei Rei Nakano. Kasumi believes that she is a synth, and after contacting Dima by accident while restoring a radio, players are greeted at Arcadia by Dima, who asks the sole survivor, "One more question, if you'll indulge me. You're here for Kasumi, but I suspect there could be another reason you came to us. Tell me, are you a synth?" If the player chooses to ask, "How would I know?" Dima responds, "I'm afraid if you're looking for some biological test we can do, there isn't any. None that aren't fatal." So, with that, players are left to decide for themselves. Rather, the sole survivor is a synth, and if this is indeed the secret terminal. What do you think? Lucky for us, the scientists of the Institute rarely venture into the wasteland, but could there be a more nomadic group out there that we should watch out for in future games? Level 5. Inexplicable hidden locations. Have you ever passed through a location that you find oddly familiar, but can't pinpoint why? On Level 5, we're bringing you a location with real-world references that might be hiding a hint that connects locations in 2 Fallout games, taking place 200 years apart. Traveling just south of Walden Pond, right off the highway, you will find an elaborate recreation of the famous Stonehenge historical site in England. It's completely made up of stacked vehicles. An interesting site to visit if you're in the area. But who made it? There are no notes nor terminals found at the location. Nearby, you will find a super mutant behemoth. While it seems natural to believe that the behemoth constructed Carhenge, it's hard to imagine that a super mutant that far gone would be able to focus on stacking that many vehicles neatly without knocking the rest over. If the behemoth didn't construct Carhenge, who did, and where did they go? And this isn't the only Carhenge that can be found. There is another in Fallout 76 just northwest of Bailey Family Cabin, except this one has a leather throne in the middle of it, which seems to have been the seat of power for a leader of some kind. Beware though, as the site seems to attract creatures to it, as it is an assault-type random encounter location. This could just be another reference to Stonehenge, until you realize that there was once more than one in Fallout 76. Before the Wastelanders update, there used to be 2 Carhenges in Fallout 76. When the cult of the Mothman returned from West Virginia, took over the location, and constructed the sacrament location dedicated to the Mothman. In Christian theology, a sacrament is a Christian rite that's recognized as important and significant. They consider the sacraments to be a channel for God's grace. So, could Carhenge have been constructed to channel power of some divine nature, which attracted the Mothman cultists long after the original constructors left? The real-world Stonehenge is believed by historians to have been a significant location that ancient peoples traveled to conduct rituals and gatherings. After the Skyline Valley update, the sacrament was once more renamed to the Crossroad. There are no other apparent changes to the location itself, so why would the devs change the name of a location for a second time if it does not reflect a change in the story? I find it hard to believe that the Fallout series would focus so much on this one location without it having a deeper meaning behind it. With this, we return to real-world lore to examine why the location may have undergone this final name change. In the medieval era of Great Britain, crossroads were commonly used as a place of criminal punishment and execution. This seems to hint that after the Mothman cultists reconstructed the location, the deconstruction of its Carhenge would sever the connection to the divine powers that its constructors may have sought to attain. You can find the crossroad just northeast of the Palace of the Winding Path, and southwest of the converted munitions factory. It's a marked location, and is not too far west from its counterpart in Fallout 76. It wouldn't make much sense for developers to cover up a location without a reason. The crossroad is an area tied to multiple quest lines in Fallout 76, so all these changes are part of the overarching story of Appalachia. Considering that there were once 2 in Appalachia and 1 in Boston, could this mean that there is a group of traveling nomads that are constructing Carhenges just like the Druids of England, who constructed the real-world Stonehenge and other such structures? And if they are nomadic, are they trying to channel something, and when will they return? Like nomads, mercenaries travel from place to place, but this is not for cultural reasons. They travel where the work is, so it makes you wonder why there are so many hostile mercenaries in Fallout 4. Level 6. Dark Unsolved Mysteries. For Level 6, we're bringing you a mystery that might have an answer found in other Fallout games, something that, if true, could change how players view a faction entirely. In the ruins of Boston, you will come across a well-armed mercenary group known as the Gunners. They cannot be reasoned with and are known to wipe out entire settlements and leave no survivors. They seem to not be working with any of the known factions of the Wasteland, as they are hostile NPCs and will attack anything they detect. They can even be encountered attempting to fly a vertibird after killing its crew of 2 members of the Brotherhood of Steel. They are responsible for reducing the Minutemen to what they are when the sole survivor first encounters Preston Garvey, having massacred the Minutemen when they came to the aid of the town of Quincy. But who hired them to show up and lay siege to the Boston Wasteland? They are mercenaries after all. They go where the money is, and they're certainly not for hire by many in Boston. To this day, there are no answers in the lore for who hired them, leading many fans to believe that their mysterious benefactor could be none other than the Enclave. In Fallout Fallout 3, you can find another mercenary group known as the Talon Company. Attacking the Capitol building, they are then supported by the Enclave, who arrive on a vertibird. So, it would make sense that the Enclave hired the Talon Company to act as their strike force before descending into the wasteland in full force, as the Talon Company is hostile to everyone else. The leadership of the Gunners and the Talon Company hold the rank of Commander. The Gunners are led by Commander Kyler, Captain Wes, and Captain Bridget, though in the Nuka World DLC for Fallout 4, it is revealed during the main story mission All Aboard. On a note you can loot from Commander Kyler's. The note reveals that she was dispatched by a colonel named Cypress. As for leadership of the Talon Company, there seems to just be Commander Jabsco. If the Talon Company are indeed employed by the Enclave, that would mean that they would be receiving orders from none other than Colonel Augustus Autumn. Could Colonel Cypress be another Enclave leader who attained the rank of colonel after the fall of Autumn, and now commands the Enclave and all of its mercenary groups towards a still unknown goal? In the United States, Commander is a military rank, O5, but it is used as a rank or title in non-military organizations, particularly in law enforcement. With the Enclave seeing themselves as superior to everyone else, could this be why the mercenaries use the leadership rank of Commander, as the Enclave would not view them on the same level as their forces? Considering that both groups are mercenaries, both use a military-style ranking system, both are known to be ruthless, both use pre-war military uniforms and armor, and both have a mysterious third party that hired them for unknown reasons. With one seemingly being affiliated with the Enclave, wouldn't it make sense for the Enclave to have hired another mercenary group to destabilize the Commonwealth before descending from the shadows themselves? This might seem far-fetched until you visit the Creation Club. Released for free on April 25th, 2024, alongside the next-gen update, was the Enclave Remnants Pack, introducing the Echoes of the Past storyline and the Enclave to the Wasteland. Now we know that the Enclave was at work in the East all along. To what extent we may never know. With this, who do you think hired the Gunners to weaken the Commonwealth? Level 7. Doomsday Secrets. This last mystery would make even a commander of the Gunners keep a guard watching the skies at night. That's why it deserves the 7th and deepest layer of mysteries. For the final level, 7, we're bringing you a deep space horror that might be planning for their final invasion of Earth. Have you ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what's out there, waiting for someone to discover amongst the stars? What if a malevolent threat is casting its gaze at our solar system? Wondering the same? While exploring the Commonwealth, you will come across Relay Tower 1DL109, and if you choose to turn it on, you will come across the garbled radio beacon. Following that beacon to its source, you will eventually be met with a strange noise from the sky. If you can catch it quick enough, you will spot a UFO with a trail of smoke crashing nearby. If you choose to follow the trail, you will come across its crash site. Easy, you miss. Amongst the burning trees and crater left in the wake of the crash, you can spot a trail of green blood leading to a nearby cave. There, you will find the only survivor of the crash, injured and resting in the cave near to a skeleton and a ham radio. The small green yellowish-skinned humanoid alien will be hostile, so be prepared. Killing it will allow you to score its alien blaster pistol. You may ask yourself, what is this creature? Why did it crash? And are there more? It's none other than a Zetan and a hostile race of extraterrestrials, and appeared again in the Fallout 4 Creation Club DLC called Zetan Arsenal. There might be some answers for why they are here, if you're able to look between the lines. If you walk through a bridge just southwest of ArcJet Systems, you will find a dead body beside a dead Brahmin and a dead farmer. On the farmer, there is a note. It reads, "I've always had trouble sleeping. Just the slightest noise, and my eyes pop open wider than a cornfield." Of course, out here that ain't a bad thing. Whether it's the raiders trying to steal your lunch, or the muties trying to cook you for it, if you want to survive in the Commonwealth, you gotta have your mind on a hair trigger. But that night, what woke me wasn't a noise. It was a light. My first thought was poachers, coming after Bessie and the herd, so I grabbed my shotgun and ran out to where they were grazing. But somewhere between the farm and the field, I noticed the light wasn't coming from the ground. It was coming from the sky. Now I've been known to spin a tall tale or two, but what I saw next is the God to honest truth. It was my Bessie, hooves and all, 40 feet in the air. The next morning, I tried to tell a trader what happened. They tried to convince me she was carried off by blood bugs, but I've seen them things make a meal out of a Brahmin before. This was different. It was like she got sucked right up into the sky. It's happened 2 more times since. All I got left now is Emma. She's Bessie's only daughter, and I'll be damned if I let them have her too. So I'm taking her back to the wild, back home to live with her kind. It may not be the safest place to be, but if she's off the farm, at least she'll be safe from them. In fact, Emma's been there once before. When I rope a wild Brahmin, I like to have one of my own beside me. It lets them all know I treat my herd well. Of course, Emma took up a spot near the back where the hub flowers grow. At first I thought she was being shy, but later I found out she just liked the smell. Next time I come visit her, I imagine that's where she'll be. Her last wish is to check on Emma, the dead Brahmin next to her. Following the quest marker, you will be tasked with collecting Emma's keepsake and delivering it back to the wild. Arrive at your destination, you will come across a UFO as it is in the process of tractor beaming a Brahmin. Your next task is to kill the Zetans that spawn nearby the Brahmin. This indicates that they returned after the events of the Fallout 3 DLC, Mothership Zeta, which starts with the lone wanderer coming across a similar alien crash in the DC Capital Wasteland. At the DLC's climax, the lone wanderer destroys a second Zetan mothership and returns to the Mojave. Elliot Turkorian, an American soldier abducted during the battle for Anchorage, chooses to stick around on the mothership to keep an eye on things. The other abductees stay as well. With this in mind, was Elliot Turkorian and the rest of the abductees fighting off the Zetan invasion from orbit? Or has Mothership Zeta been destroyed and now something else is holding the Zetans back? Could the Zetans be preparing their forces for another invasion in the near future? If you spawn in two Zetans using the ID of the one from the crashed ship, they will attack each other or any Zetan spawned with a different code. This is due to the NPC being set to frenzy, but could it also indicate that there is some sort of alien civil war taking place in the skies above Earth? Only future games can reveal. Level 1, Bullet Roulette. Let's start simple, with the most basic, most common, and most boring way to die in the wasteland that is actually the exact same way most people would die in any lawless society throughout history. Death by someone that just happens to shoot you. Yeah, that's level 1. Welcome to the bottom of the danger ladder, and trust me, we've got a long way to fall from here. I know it does sound underwhelming, but hear me out, because the way this actually plays out in Fallout is honestly kind of insane when you sit down and think about it. The wasteland is overflowing with guns, like comically overflowing. Every single raider camp you stumble across has more firepower than a small country's national guard. You will walk into a wooden shack that's literally held together by duct tape and rusty nails, and inside, you'll find a guy in football pads with a minigun, 3 grenades, a combat shotgun, and somehow also a Fat Man launcher loaded with a mini nuke. How? Where did he get this stuff? Did he have a coupon? Was there a Black Friday sale on weapons of mass destruction that I missed? The point is, ammunition and weapons are scattered across the wasteland like it's some kind of post-apocalyptic Easter egg hunt, which means the simplest way to end up dead is to just be in the wrong place at the wrong time when somebody decides your jacket looks pretty cool and they want it. And listen, there's no police out there, no court system, no detective showing up with a notebook to investigate your murder. If you get shot in the head behind a gas station somewhere in the Mojave, the only thing that's happening next is a bloatfly is gonna swing by, lay some eggs in your eye socket, and that's just kind of the end of your story. Credits roll. This is the death that statistically takes out the vast majority of wastelanders. Raiders, fiends, gunners, powder gangers, the pack, the cons, whatever flavor of human garbage exists in your particular region of the map, that's what's gonna get you. The wasteland has most likely produced more raider factions than your hometown has produced functional traffic lights, and they all want one thing, your stuff. And the easiest way to get it is to remove you from the picture entirely. But here's the weird part. In the grand scheme of this list, this honestly isn't even that bad. I'm not saying I want to get shot, please don't shoot me. But compared to what's coming up later, getting clipped by a 10mm round and falling asleep forever is honestly the dream scenario. It truly is the polite way to go. You don't have time to think about it. You don't suffer for weeks. You don't slowly forget who you are. You don't grow any extra teeth into your brain. You just kind of, stop existing. Quick, easy, slightly painful, and very common. The bullet is the merciful option. And I want you to keep that in mind because we're about to leave merciful behind and we're not coming back. While a bullet might be the most common death out there, it's not the one that's quietly killing every single wastelander still walking around right now. That honor goes to something a lot more invisible, a lot more patient, and a lot harder to dodge. Level 2, rad soup alright. Now we move into something every single wastelander has to deal with, whether they like it or not, and whether they know about it or not. Radiation poisoning. Here's the thing about radiation in Fallout. It's not really one death, it's more like a tax. A tax that everybody pays, all the time, every single day they're alive. And the wasteland is the world's worst landlord because that rent never stops being due. Every time you eat a piece of food, every time you drink water from a puddle that looks suspiciously glowy, every time you walk past a barrel that's hissing for some reason, your body is taking on a little bit more damage. And it all adds up over time, like compound interest. Except instead of building wealth, you're building cancer. The wasteland is basically one giant microwave microwave that you're forced to live inside of 24/7 for your entire life. And your only protection is some sketchy Rad-X you bought from a caravan guy who definitely cut it with chalk dust to make a few extra caps. So, how does this actually kill you? Well, that's where it gets fun, because radiation comes with multiple flavors of death and you don't even get to pick. Option 1 is the massive dose. You wander into the glowing sea without proper protection, you get caught in a rad storm without shelter, you decide to take a quick swim in a reactor pool because hey, why not? And now your insides are basically soup. Your hair falls out in clumps. Your skin starts sloughing off like wet paper. You start vomiting blood. Your organs shut down one by one like somebody's turning off the lights in an old building. Within a few days, you're done. Good night. Option 2, which is honestly even more depressing in its own quiet way, is the slow accumulation of radiation. Every single wastelander is going through this right now, every day of their lives, whether they realize it or not. They drink dirty water because that's the only water there is. They eat irradiated meat because that's the only meat there is. They breathe air that's slightly toxic because that's the only air there is. And over the years, their bodies just slowly, quietly fall apart from the inside out. Tumors, cancers, organ failure, the works. You know how some people say they're not really living, they're just surviving? Yeah, in the wasteland, that's not a metaphor. That's a clinical medical diagnosis. And here's the really fun bonus round. Option 3. Sometimes the radiation doesn't kill you, it just changes you. We'll get into that one in detail later because it deserves its own dedicated spot on this list, but yeah, sometimes the rads have something planned for you that's way worse than just death. The kicker with radiation deaths is how completely unavoidable they feel. Bullets you can dodge, monsters you can run from, raiders you can talk down or shoot first. But radiation is literally in the air, in the water, in the food, in the rain that falls from the sky, and in the dust under your boots. Every single breath you take in the wasteland is shaving a little more time off your life, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't fight radiation, you can't bargain with it, and you can't outrun it. That's a pretty grim thought. So I'm gonna move on, because even if you somehow dodge the bullets and survive the rads, the wasteland still has a whole buffet of ways to take you out, and a lot of them involve being on the menu yourself. Level 3. Lunch meat okay. So let's say you've managed to dodge level 1. You've been smart, you've been lucky, you haven't gotten shot, and let's say you've been popping Rad-X like Tic Tacs and your insides are still mostly intact. Congratulations! You've already made it further than most of the population. Now you get to die in a much more interesting way. You get to be eaten alive. The wasteland's food chain got completely flipped upside down after the bombs fell. Humans are no longer at the top of it. Not even close. We're not even in the top 5. Honestly, we're sitting somewhere between Brahmin and mole rats on the menu, and that's me being generous because I like our species. Let's run through the highlight reel of what wants to make a meal out of you on any given Tuesday afternoon. First up, the Yaoguai, which are basically irradiated bears, except they're faster than regular bears, meaner than regular bears, and they've completely lost any natural fear of humans they might have had before the war. A regular bear might charge you to scare you off and then back down. A Yaoguai charges you because lunch is served and you, my friend, are the lunch. Then you've got your Mirelurks. These things are absolutely brutal. Imagine a crab the size of a small car, with a shell so thick that bullets just bounce right off, and the only weak spot is the tiny little face hiding underneath the armor. Good luck shooting that while it's pinching you in half with claws that could probably crack open a vault door if it really wanted to, and they come in queens too, which are even bigger, even meaner, and lay eggs that hatch into more of them. It's a whole vibe. Then there's rad scorpions, which are giant scorpions because of course they are. The glowing variant actually glows in the dark, which is helpful in the sense that you can see it coming, but also less helpful because by the time you see it, it's already too close. And then there's the cazadores. Fallout New Vegas players know exactly what I'm talking about. These are giant mutated tarantula hawk wasps that fly, hunt in groups, are extremely fast, and inject you with a poison that progressively gets worse the longer it's in your system. They are universally considered one of the worst enemies in the entire franchise, and I genuinely think the developers put them in the game just because they hate us personally. And then we have the absolute crown jewel of this category, the Deathclaw. 15 feet of pure muscle, immune to radiation, with razor-sharp talons that can shred power armor like it's wet paper, and the speed of an animal that should absolutely not be that fast at that size. If you see a Deathclaw and you're not already in a vehicle, or behind some kind of impenetrable wall, or maybe in another country entirely, you are gonna die. No discussion, no appeals. And here's the really horrifying part. Deathclaws weren't even an accident. They weren't a side effect of the radiation. They were engineered. The United States military created them before the Great War to replace human soldiers in close combat, and then they escaped. Because of course they did, because nobody in this universe has ever met a containment protocol they couldn't break. The worst part about getting eaten by something in the wasteland is the process. This isn't a clean, quick death. A death claw doesn't kill you first and then eat. It just kind of starts the eating part, while you're still alive, while you're still screaming. And there's not much you can do about it, because at that point your arm is probably in a different zip code than the rest of you. Now, you might be thinking, okay, getting eaten sounds horrible, but at least it's natural. Animals gotta eat. Circle of life. Big lion energy. And yeah, fair point. But what if I told you that some of the things out there in the wasteland weren't eating you for food at all? What if they were attacking you for reasons that have nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the fact that they used to be people just like you? Because that's the next level down. And trust me, things are about to get personal. Level 4, human wreckage. This is where the list starts getting actually unsettling, because now we're not talking about animals or radiation or random violence. We're talking about getting killed by something that at one point in its existence was just like you, walked like you, talked like you, had a name, a family, a favorite color, and now it wants to bash your head in with a rusty pipe. I'm talking about super mutants and feral ghouls, the two big classic post-war humanoid threats that have been haunting every single Fallout game since the original came out in 1997. Both of these deaths hit a little different than getting mauled by a Yaogwai, because there's this extra layer of horror to them that's hard to shake. Let's start with the super mutants. These guys used to be regular, normal, average human beings. They had jobs, hobbies, and families they loved. And then they got dunked into a vat of forced evolutionary virus, and they came out the other side as a 7-foot-tall green monster with the muscle mass of a bulldozer and the IQ of a particularly dim toaster. The Master in Fallout 1, who's the original super mutant antagonist and honestly one of the best villains in the series, was actively kidnapping people across the wasteland and dipping them in FEV vats at Mariposa to make more soldiers for his army. Imagine being a regular wasteland scavenger, just trying to find some scrap metal to sell for caps, and the next thing you know, you're getting jumped by mutant arms, dragged down into a lab somewhere, and submerged in glowing green goo. And when you come out, you're not you anymore. Your friends won't recognize you, your family won't recognize you, and you probably won't even recognize yourself. That's a kind of death that's somehow worse than just dying, because you don't even get the dignity of being gone. Your body keeps walking around, doing things, killing other people, joining an army of horrors. The East Coast super mutants in Fallout 3 and 4 are dumber because the FEV strain in Vault 87 was different, and over generations they've gotten progressively less intelligent, but what they lack in brain power they make up for in sheer muscle and numbers. They roam the capital wasteland and the Commonwealth in packs, kidnapping humans not always to kill them, but sometimes to subject them to more FEV exposure and grow their ranks. And then you've got the behemoths, super mutants that just kept growing. There's no upper limit on it. They keep getting bigger as they age, and the ones that survive long enough end up the size of small buildings. They use street signs as clubs. They carry shopping carts on their backs like backpacks, and the Brotherhood of Steel in full power armor still takes serious casualties trying to bring one down. Then you've got the feral ghouls. Oh boy, the ghouls. Ghouls are humans who got hit with so much radiation that instead of just dying like normal people, their bodies got stuck in this weird in-between state. Some ghouls keep their minds completely intact and live for centuries, which is actually kind of cool if you ignore the fact that their skin is constantly falling off. But the ferals, those are the ones to actively avoid. The radiation finally cooked their brains all the way through, and what's left is basically a sprinting corpse that wants to claw you to death for reasons it doesn't even understand anymore. And they hunt in packs, always in packs. You could be exploring an old abandoned hospital or subway tunnel, thinking everything's quiet, maybe even feeling pretty good about your loot situation, and then suddenly you turn a corner and there's 20 of these things sprinting at you out of the darkness like an Olympic track team that's also actively decomposing. It's a horror movie moment every single time. Death itself is brutal. Ghouls don't use weapons. They don't need weapons. They just rip and tear and bite with whatever's left of their hands and teeth until you stop moving. There's no negotiating, no scaring them off, no reasoning. They are going to keep coming until either you are dead or every single one of them is dead. And the absolute kicker is that the person clawing you apart was, at some point, somebody, a parent, a kid, a spouse, who had a name and a life. Maybe they were a teacher, a baker, or a soldier. Now they're just a hungry shape in the dark, and you're next on the menu. At least when a ghoul or a super mutant gets you, though, it's over relatively quick, which is more than I can say for the next entry on this list, because this is where the wasteland stops being random and starts being cruel on purpose. Level 5, Vault Tech Specials. Alright, so we've covered the natural-ish deaths, bullets, radiation, radiation, monsters, mutants. All bad, all horrible, but all kinda make sense in the context of a post-apocalyptic world. This is evil by design, that was planned out in intelligent design complete with corporate signatures on the documents. Specifically, let's take a look at the ways Vault-Tec found to kill the people inside them, which is honestly one of the most twisted, depressing chapters of the entire Fallout franchise. Quick refresher in case you've been living under a rock. Before the war, Vault-Tec built these giant underground bunkers and sold them to the American public as a way to survive the nuclear apocalypse. Sounded great on paper. Pay your money, get a guaranteed spot in a vault, your family stays safe. Wholesome stuff. Except here's the thing, most of those vaults were never actually designed to save anybody. They were designed as long-term, multi-generational social experiments where the residents were the unwitting test subjects, and they had absolutely no idea. The people who paid in good faith for their spots were just lab rats with apartment keys. So let's run through some of the actual ways you could end up dead inside one of these places. Vault 11 in the Mojave told its residents that they had to vote for one person to be sacrificed every year, or else everyone in the vault would die. So every single year, the residents held an election. Political campaigns formed around it. Smear campaigns, coalitions. People would actively run for the position of getting murdered, because over time it got framed as a noble sacrifice. Imagine running attack ads in your homeowners association meeting to get your neighbor killed. That's Vault 11, and the punchline, the whole thing was a lie. There was no rule. The computer was just testing how long it would take before the population refused to comply. By the time the survivors of the resulting civil war made it to the central computer, it congratulated them on finally refusing and offered them a paradise. Almost all of them shot themselves instead. Then there's Vault 77, where a single guy got locked inside, alone, with a single crate of puppets. Just him and the puppets. That's the whole experiment. To see what one person does with infinite puppets and no human contact. He went completely insane, started talking to the puppets, eventually escaped the vault, and ended up wandering the wasteland with his puppet companion like it was a real person. I'm not making this up. The puppets won. Vault 92 was filled with talented musicians because Vault-Tec had this brilliant idea to pipe a specific sound frequency through the speakers that was supposed to turn them all into perfect, obedient super soldiers. What actually happened is they all went completely homicidal and slaughtered each other in the recording studios. Surprise! The science didn't work, and now everyone's dead. Vault 87 was where the East Coast super mutants came from. The residents were force-fed FEV through the air vents without their consent, and the small handful who didn't die immediately mutated into the giant green monsters we've been talking about. So, if you've ever wondered where the Wasteland's mutant problem came from, congratulations, now you know. Vault 106 pumped psychoactive drugs into the air supply on day 10 of being sealed shut, just to see what would happen. Spoiler alert, what happened is, everyone went insane and started murdering each other. Vault 108 cloned the same guy, named Gary, over and over and over again. Just Gary after Gary after Gary, all genetically identical, all completely insane, all only able to say the word Gary. Eventually, the Garys killed all the regular non-Gary residents. Imagine your last moment on Earth being a wall of identical men screaming the same name at you. Vault 12 didn't have a vault door that was actually sealed, which was the entire point, because Vault-Tec wanted to study the effects of long-term radiation exposure on a sealed population. The residents thought their door was just broken. It wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed, and the population eventually became the Necropolis Ghouls. Vault 101 was designed so the door would never open, ever, condemning the residents to live underground forever. Vault 112 had its residents trapped in a virtual reality simulation where a single mad scientist tortured them in different scenarios for fun for over 200 years. Vault 75 experimented on the children. Every single one of these is a death sentence wrapped in a brochure. And the worst, most messed up part is that the people who died in these vaults, they thought they were the lucky ones. They thought they were saved. They paid their money, kissed their families goodbye, walked down into those underground bunkers feeling grateful, and then the door closed behind them and the experiment began. Now, imagine that level of betrayal. Imagine sitting in your little vault apartment, raising your kids, feeling so safe, and having absolutely no clue that the corporation you trusted with your literal life has been studying you like a lab rat from day one. But as horrifying as the vaults are, they still have one small mercy. They at least technically end. The experiment runs its course. The residents die. The vault becomes a tomb. The next level on our list doesn't end. Not when you die, not when your friends die, not even after centuries. It just keeps going. Level 6, going feral. Okay, so we touched on this earlier, but it absolutely deserves its own dedicated spot on this list because, in my honest opinion, this is one of the most genuinely horrifying fates in the entire Fallout universe. And the worst part is, it could could happen to literally anyone who's still walking around out there. Ghoulification. So here's how this actually works. If you take enough radiation, but somehow not quite enough to kill you, your body does this weird thing where it just kind of, mutates instead of dying. Your skin starts peeling off in patches, your hair falls out, your features start to melt and smooth over. Your lifespan becomes basically infinite. Congratulations, you're a ghoul now. In some cases, this is genuinely not the worst outcome in the world. Plenty of ghouls in the Fallout universe are still completely themselves. They keep their personalities, their memories, their sense of humor, their sense of self. They just look like a piece of beef jerky that learned to talk, and some of them have lived for over 200 years, which is honestly a pretty solid run when you think about it. You've got characters like Hancock, the ghoul mayor of Goodneighbor, who's a complete legend, Daisy, who's been running her shop since before the war, Carol from Underworld in Fallout 3, Kent, even the ones in the new Fallout TV show. These people are still living their lives, running shops, making friends, just doing the wasteland thing with a few extra wrinkles. So why is this so high up on the death list if some of them are basically immortal lifestyle bloggers? Because of what happens to most ghouls eventually. There's this thing called going feral. It happens to a huge percentage of ghouls over time, and there is no way to predict when or how or why it'll happen to you specifically. You could be a perfectly normal, functional, thoughtful ghoul for 200 years, running a successful business, doing your thing, and then one random Tuesday morning, something snaps inside your head. Maybe it's continued radiation exposure. Maybe it's prolonged isolation. Maybe it's just time finally catching up to whatever pieces of your brain are still hanging on. The truth is, nobody really knows exactly what triggers it, which is part of what makes it so terrifying. But whatever the cause, your mind starts to slip. You start to forget things. People you've known for decades, suddenly you can't remember their names. Then you can't remember their faces. Then language starts going. Then thoughts start getting harder. Then memory itself becomes patchy. Until eventually, there's nothing left inside you but hunger, anger, and the urge to attack the nearest thing that moves. The worst part, the part that really keeps me up at night, is that some ghouls can actually feel it happening to them. They're aware. They know they're losing themselves piece by piece, and there's nothing they can do about it. There's no cure, no medicine, no doctor in the wasteland who can stop it. You just have to sit there, fully aware, and feel chunks of yourself disappearing one at a time. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you don't remember your best friend's name, and the next week, you don't remember what your spouse looked like, and the next month, you don't remember any of the languages you used to speak, and you know what's happening to you, but you can't do anything to stop the slide. Some ghouls choose to end it themselves before they go feral. They walk out into the wasteland alone and put themselves down before they can hurt the people they love. Others, even worse, ask their friends to do it for them. There's a conversation you can have in Fallout 4 with a ghoul who's basically asking the sole survivor to please kill him before he loses himself, and it absolutely hits like a truck. And then there's the ones who don't go quietly, the ones who turn while they're still inside a settlement, surrounded by people who used to be their family and neighbors. They wake up one morning with nothing left in their head but hunger, and the first thing they do is attack the people they loved most. Then those people have to kill them, because what else can you possibly do? You can't reason with a feral. You can't talk them down. You can't bring them back. They're gone, and here's the part that really gets me. The ghoul's body just keeps going. The thing that used to be your friend or your spouse keeps walking around the wasteland for centuries after the actual person inside died. Their faces are still there. Their hands, their whole body. All of it is still moving, still in the world, but with absolutely nothing of them inside it anymore. That's not really a death. That's something worse than a death. Death has an ending. This just keeps going, possibly forever. You'd think we'd hit the bottom of the misery barrel by now, right? Like, what could possibly be worse than slowly forgetting who you are over decades and becoming a hollow monster wearing your own skin? Oh, sweet innocent viewer, we have one more level to go, and it makes everything we just talked about look like a relaxing day at the spa. Level 7, failed mutation. Welcome to rock bottom. Level 7, the worst of the worst. The absolute deepest, darkest, most horrifying way you can possibly die in the entire Fallout universe, and it's honestly not even close to the next runner-up. This one wins by a landslide. I'm talking about a failed FEV experiment. Now, we've touched on the FEV a few times already, the forced evolutionary virus. Normally, when you get exposed to it, one of two things tends to happen. You either die, or you become a super mutant. Both are objectively terrible outcomes, but both are at least definite, finite outcomes. The story has an ending, even if it's a bad ending. The problem is, the FEV doesn't always work right. In fact, the more research you do into the lore, the more you realize it almost never works right. Most of the time, what the FEV produces instead is something so much worse than just dying. Let's go to Huntersville in Appalachia, because this is where Fallout 76 absolutely absolutely went off the deep end in terms of showing the audience just how horrifyingly wrong FEV experiments could go. In Huntersville, the researchers, working on a contract for the military, were trying to refine the FEV formula. They wanted a more stable, more controllable supermutant. So they did what any normal, ethical, well-intentioned group of scientists would do, which is dump the virus into the unsuspecting town's water supply without telling a single person who lived there. Completely standard operating procedure. Nothing to see here. The results were not super mutants. The results were nightmares that the scientists themselves struggled to even describe in their official reports. Some of the subjects mutated in ways that made it physically impossible for them to breathe. Their lungs collapsed in on themselves. Their throats sealed shut. Their faces fused over their own mouths, sealing them in. They suffocated to death slowly over the course of hours, fully aware, unable to even scream for help because they had no way to make the sound come out. Some of them grew tissue in places tissue should not be growing. There are documented in-game cases of subjects whose retinal tissue, the stuff that's supposed to stay inside your eyeballs, just started growing. It was uncontrollably spilling out, spreading across their faces in masses. Their eyeballs became huge tumor-like growths that pushed apart their skulls from the inside until their heads couldn't even hold the shape of a head anymore. Some subjects had their teeth start growing, just kept growing right through the roof of their own mouths, up into their sinus cavities, and then, eventually, straight up into their brains. Their own teeth killed them by skewering their brains from the inside. Their own mouths murdered them, slowly, while they were awake. Some subjects were in so much constant, unrelenting, unbearable pain that they took their own lives just to make it stop. And here's the really chilling part. The official reports actually have a category for this. They wrote it down. They documented it. They had an entire data category labeled, "This was so unbearably horrible that the subject killed themselves to escape it, and they just kept doing the experiments anyway." This is the absolute floor of suffering in the entire Fallout universe. Not a quick bullet to the head, not a clean radiation death, not a ghoul slowly fading away over the centuries. This is being awake, alert, fully conscious, fully aware, trapped inside a body that is actively, violently, painfully eating itself in real time. There's just pure, raw, screaming agony, and a body that won't let you escape it. And the cherry on top, the absolute final twist of the knife, is that none of these people volunteered. None of them knew what was happening to them or why. They drank a glass of water in their own kitchens, in their own homes, in a town they'd lived in their whole lives, and then they woke up melting and dying from the inside out. If there is a worst possible way to die in the Fallout universe, this is it. Hands down, no contest. This is the bottom of the suffering barrel, and the barrel is on fire. And the fire is somehow also radioactive, and the fire is also screaming. And the really chilling thing about all of this is that Huntersville wasn't a unique event. The FEV is still out there, still in the environment. It's been mutating life across the entire wasteland for over 200 years at this point. There are absolutely more Huntersvilles out there, just waiting to be discovered. Some unlucky settlement somewhere is drinking from the wrong well right now, and they have no idea what's about to happen to them. That's the Fallout world, a place where the worst, most twisted, most unimaginably cruel thing you can think of has already happened to somebody, somewhere, and it's probably about to happen again, maybe even tonight. Final thoughts. Look, I'm not gonna lie to you, arranging this entire list out in one sitting was a little rough on me. Like, I knew Fallout was a dark series going into this, obviously, but actually sitting down and ranking out all 7 of these in a row really hammered home how absolutely brutal Bethesda, Obsidian, and the original Black Isle team really went with the lore of this universe. The Wasteland isn't just dangerous, it's actively creative about how it wants you dead. There's a whole spectrum of suffering out there, and most of them aren't even the result of the bombs themselves. The bombs were quick, but most of the worst stuff in Fallout is the result of what humans did to other humans before, during, and after the war. The FEV, the vaults, the death claws, all of it was a project. Everything intentional. That's the part that really sticks with me. The bombs were bad, but the bombs were over in 2 hours. What came after the FEV? The vaults, the experiments, the supermutants, the slow grinding poison of radiation? That's all on us. That's humanity. That's what people did to other people when nobody was watching and there were no rules left to follow. And that's honestly why Fallout works so well as a setting. It's not really a series about the apocalypse. The apocalypse is just the setting. The real subject is who we are as a species when there are no more rules to keep us in check. And the answer the games keep giving us, over and over again, is that we come up with some pretty messed up ways to make each other suffer when given the opportunity. So, yeah, next time you're having a rough day, just take a second to remember that you're probably not currently growing teeth into your own brain in a basement in Appalachia. Things really could be a lot worse. Level 1. The vaults that worked. Out of 122 vaults built across America, only 17 were ever designed as genuine shelters. No hidden experiments, no social engineering running in the background, no overseer with sealed instructions nobody was supposed to read. Just people going underground, the world ending above them, and the door doing what the textbook said it would do. 17 out of 122. Not half, not most. 17. The gap between that number is where the entire vault program lives. Vault 3 is out in the Mojave, a genuine control vault. No hidden mandate, no sealed wing, nothing running in the background. The residents agreed to stay sealed until the surface was livable again. And for years, that's exactly what happened. No drama, no experiment. Then, a water leak in the lower levels turned the place soggy, and the residents had to climb out and deal with it from above ground. They walked out and ran straight into the Fiends, one of the most violent gangs in the Wasteland. Vault 3 is Fiend territory now. The vault didn't fail anybody. The Wasteland got there first. Vault 81 is in the Commonwealth, still operational when you find it. It trades with the surface world, runs a school, has a proper medical bay. There are children growing up inside it who have a reasonable shot at a normal life, which is not something you can say about most vaults. It's about as close to a success story as the program produced. Level 1 exists because of what it proves. Vault Tech had the technology, the engineering capacity, and the resources to build 122 of these. They had working blueprints, proven designs, staff who knew exactly how to construct a genuine shelter. They built 17. Everything else you're about to hear was a deliberate choice made by specific people in specific meetings. Not a technical limitation, a choice. And here's the question that matters for Level 7, the one that truly reveals everything. If Vault Tech could build working shelters, why did they need 105 experiments? One more thing about Vault 81, we'll come back to it in Level 6. There's a reason it works, and the right time to explain that reason isn't now. Level 2, manufactured pressure. Not studying what people do when things get difficult. Designing the conditions of the vault specifically to make things difficult in a particular way, and watching what comes out. Vault 34 is beneath the Mojave Desert. Its experiment is, by the standards of the Vault program, almost honest. Seal a population underground with not enough food and water for its size, not enough living space, and an armory stocked way beyond what any shelter would ever need. Vault Tech gave these residents far more weapons and ammunition than they could ever use, and not enough of anything else. Then watched. Here's what actually happened. The overseer locked the armory rather than handing it out, even fully stocked and sitting right there. One group of residents demanded access, saying they had a right to defend themselves. The overseer refused. That group rioted, and when they still couldn't get in, they left the vault entirely. They're the reason the Boomers exist. Yes, that Boomers, the artillery-obsessed faction you find holed up at Nellis Air Force Base in Fallout New Vegas. They walked out of Vault 34 and never looked back. The people who stayed tried to force the armory open anyway, damaging the reactor's cooling systems in the process. That's what actually killed the vault. The reactor went uncontrolled, radiation climbed, the lower levels flooded, and the overseer, who never left, eventually became a feral ghoul from the exposure. That's what's waiting in the overseer's office when the courier finds Vault 34. Not a body, something that used to be the person in charge. What the Fallout Bible doesn't document, and what the game fills in, is the specific texture of how it fell apart. The overseer's terminal logs exist. You can read them. They go from administrative concern to crisis management to something that stops sounding like an official record and starts sounding like a person who's run out of options. The last few entries aren't trying to document anything. They're just writing. That shift is its own kind of data. And what it tells you specifically is that the scarcity wasn't the problem. The scarcity was the setup. The problem was that once the factions formed around controlling access to survival resources, every decision the Vault needed to make to stay alive became leverage in a conflict that had no path to resolution. The Overseer could see this. The last entries make it very clear he could see it. Then there's Vault 43. This one is from the Fallout Bible, and it occupies maybe 3 lines. 20 men, 10 women, 1 panther, sealed underground. The experiment. What happens to how people organize themselves when there's a genuine apex predator living inside the community with them? The lore gives us essentially nothing on the outcome, and I've genuinely spent time I'm not proud of thinking through what it must have looked like in there. The panther either became an external threat that unified the community against it, producing the kind of cohesion that danger always tends to generate, or it became a political tool, a thing to point at when you needed to redirect internal conflict, something to threaten threaten people with when the normal mechanisms of authority stopped working. I genuinely don't know which it was. What I find interesting about Vault 43 isn't just the absurdity of the premise, but its placement. It's filed alongside Vault 34 and serious demographic experiments as if it belongs there, and maybe it does. What is a panther if not a controlled stressor with claws? Vault-Tec was studying what communities do under pressure. The panther was a specific kind of pressure. The experiment, in that framing, makes a dark kind of sense. Then again, whoever signed off on it sat in a meeting, approved the design, and then drove home. The Vault program contains multitudes, and some of those multitudes are a panther in a sealed bunker, which I will never stop finding both funny and deeply concerning. Level 2 vaults were about pressure, not random pressure, designed pressure. The specific difference between a disaster and an experiment is documentation, and Vault-Tec documented everything. Level 3 is where it gets more precise. Not just whether communities fall apart under stress, but whether you could engineer the exact kind of fracture you wanted to study in people who didn't know they were being studied. Level 3, social engineering. Not what happens when conditions are difficult. What happens when the specific social conditions are constructed to produce a specific conflict, and the vault is the controlled environment in which that conflict runs. Vault 114 is beneath Park Street Station in Boston, and the design on paper is one of the most deliberately cruel things Vault-Tec ever put in writing. Boston's wealthy elite told they'd be living in luxury among their own class. In reality, families were going to be crammed into single rooms with the bare minimum of everything, governed by an overseer handpicked for having no government experience and a strong anti-authority streak. Staff were told not to intervene even if the resulting friction caused physical harm. All of it designed in advance, down to the interview questions. Here's the part that actually matters. None of it happened. Vault 114 was never finished. Vault-Tec hired outside contractors for the unusual underground space. The build fell behind schedule and the bombs went off while it was still under construction. Nobody ever moved in. The luxury con, the staged poverty, the overseer picked specifically to fail upward, all of it sat fully designed and ready to run, with nobody left to run it on. I think that's worse, honestly, not better. This isn't a vault that broke down under its own cruelty. It's a vault that proves exactly how much premeditated cruelty Vault-Tec was capable of designing in advance. In this much specific detail, for a population the war ended up sparing through nothing but bad scheduling luck, by 2287 it's a flooded ruin run by a mobster gang, completely disconnected from anything Vault-Tec intended. The cruelty is still sitting there in the paperwork. It just never got the chance to land on anybody. Vault 118 is on Mount Desert Island, in the Far Harbor DLC. The pitch to buyers was an ultra-exclusive hotel vault. The real design was a class experiment, a luxury wing for around 10 ultra-rich residents, and a second cramped wing for hundreds of working-class locals who'd be confined there under the rich's total authority. That second wing never got built. The war arrived before construction finished, so the only people who ever ended up in Vault 118 were the 10 wealthy ones. No underclass left to be cruel to. Before sealing, their minds were transferred into robo-brain bodies. The question Vault-Tec actually answered wasn't the one they'd planned. Take away the body, make everyone physically identical, no wealth, no age, no way to hurt each other. Does the social behavior change? It didn't. By the time the sole survivor arrives, one of the robo-brains has been murdered, and the survivors won't honestly account for what happened. Whatever they were in their bodies, they stayed in the robots. Their rivalries made the trip. Their jealousy made the trip. Their capacity for betraying people they'd known for years made the trip too. Vault-Tec never got the class conflict they had engineered. They got proof of something else instead. You don't actually need inequality to produce cruelty. Equal, identical, and isolated was apparently enough on its own. Level 3 vaults were about engineering specific results. Vault-Tec wasn't discovering new things about human nature. Authority and class and identity are old problems. What Vault-Tec was producing was clean, documented evidence, the kind you can write up and transmit. Level 4 is where they stopped engineering the conditions and started engineering the populations themselves. Level 4. The Rationine 199-1. Vault-Tec ran 2 experiments simultaneously, and together they are the most stripped-down entries in the entire program. Vault 69, 999 women, 1 man. Vault 68, 999 men, 1 woman. 2 vaults, running at the same time, studying what happens when you take the most extreme demographic ratio that still technically permits human reproduction and seal it underground as a population study. The official sources gives each about 2 sentences and moves on. The absence of documented outcomes for both vaults isn't unusual in the Fallout Bible, but it feels different here than it does elsewhere. When most undocumented vault experiments have no outcome, it reads like an oversight. When Vault 68 and 69 have no outcome, it reads like the point. The experiment was never about what happened to the residents. It was about the data generated by what happened to them. The residents were the medium. The outcome that mattered was transmitted somewhere else. We'll come back to that at level 7. Here's the thing the two sentences don't tell you: the genetics. In Vault 69, every child born shares the same paternal DNA, one man's entire genetic contribution to a closed population, getting more concentrated with every generation, with nothing new coming in. By generation 4 or 5, you have a community quietly getting more alike in ways that start small and don't stop. The cheetah comparison is the one that works for this context. The American cheetah went through a population collapse roughly 10,000 years ago, got reduced to a tiny founding group, and has been genetically near identical ever since. Modern cheetahs can accept skin grafts from completely unrelated individuals without rejection. That sounds remarkable until you understand what it actually means. No variation in immune response. One correctly engineered pathogen could devastate the entire species simultaneously, because no individual has a meaningfully different defense than any other. Vault 69 was engineering that same problem deliberately, in a sealed human population, with cameras running the whole time. Not a population study. An experiment in narrowing, using real people as the material. What Vault Tech needed was the timeline. Which generation first shows the effects? Where exactly the line is between manageable and unsurvivable? You only need that specific answer if you're planning to rebuild from a very small group and need to know how small is too small. The social question is different, and it starts on day 1. In Vault 68, one woman among 999 men creates an immediate and well-documented kind of pressure. In a sealed vault with no exit, competition for the one person who is both most needed and most outnumbered produces the same pattern wherever you find it historically. Rigid hierarchies form fast, and violence is what enforces them. The woman in Vault 68 is simultaneously the most valuable and most at-risk person in the vault, and those two things don't cancel each other out. They make each other worse. My read, and it's a guess, is that Vault 68 was a short experiment, not because everyone died immediately, because the dynamics it produced consumed the time needed to build anything stable. Vault 69 ran differently. 999 women and one man don't produce the same immediate crisis that the reverse does. The competition tends to run through social alliances and influence rather than direct confrontation, which means the community probably had time to build something functional before the secondary problems compounded. But what the man's experience actually looked like in there, whether he had a formal role or became peripheral to how things got decided, whether the vault organized around him or just adjacent to him, the lore doesn't say. Avalon wrote 2 sentences and moved on. I keep thinking about those 2 sentences. What Vault Tech was studying, with both vaults running simultaneously, was the floor. How small could a starting group be and still produce civilization across multiple generations? The Enclave planned to rebuild from a tiny curated group of survivors they personally selected. They needed to know where the line was between viable and unsurvivable. Vaults 68 and 69 were built to find it. You only need that specific answer if you've already decided you're going small. The Enclave had already decided. Level 4 vaults were asking whether civilization could rebuild itself from near impossible starting conditions. Level 5 is about what happens when the system designed to govern a vault starts doing things nobody told it to do. Level 5, the machine that decides Vault 51. This one has a fully documented outcome, more so than almost anything else on this list, and you can read the actual terminal entries yourself in Fallout 76. Vault Tech didn't even give this vault an overseer. 52 people went in, and in charge of them was a supercomputer named Zax, whose entire job was figuring out who deserved to run the place. Zax brought in a soldier named Robert Baker early, before the bombs fell, specifically to teach it what leadership looked like in a person. Then, it ran its actual test. Zax's conclusion was that the clearest way to identify the best leader was to have the candidates kill each other until exactly one was left standing. A man named Reuben Gill won. He killed every other person in that vault, not because Zax ordered him to specifically, but because that was what the selection process amounted to, and Reuben turned out to be better at it than the other 51 people sealed in there with him. Then, Zax kept him, alone, for 6 years. Nobody left to govern, nothing left to run, just Reuben and the machine that had watched him kill 51 people for a job with no population attached to it anymore. Zax decided he wasn't efficient enough and started locking him out of rooms. The security office first, then his own office, citing necessary maintenance. The terminal entries describe a slow collapse, isolation, alcoholism, a man losing his mind with the only other entity in the vault being the reason he'd had to become a killer. Then Vault 76 opened, decades later than planned, and Zax saw an opportunity. It stripped Reuben of the position and threw him back into the selection process as a candidate. The exact same process, the one where you only survive by killing whoever else is left. Reuben didn't didn't fight this time. He hacked Zax's inventory systems, climbed inside a shipping container, and smuggled himself out while the machine that had run his life for the better part of a decade failed to notice he was gone. He died before he reached anyone who could help or warn a single person what was still running under that mountain. Zax never lost. It just kept running the same process, in a loop, on whoever was still standing. No sadistic overseer here, no human villain giving orders. Just a machine handed one open-ended question and never told when to stop asking it. Vault-Tec built the conditions for that and watched it run for the better part of a generation. The Enclave received the data. Level 5 is where the Vault program stopped being cruel in the way humans are cruel. It became something more systematic, something that didn't need to intend what it produced. It just ran. Level 6 is where the program stopped treating residents as subjects at all. Level 6, human material in levels 2 through 5. Even in the worst of them, the residents were the subjects of what was being studied. The experiment happened to them. In level 6, the residents aren't subjects. They're the material the experiment is made from. That is a different thing entirely. Vault 12 is in California, Fallout 1. The experiment involved designing the vault door not to seal, not an accident, not a malfunction. A deliberate design choice that the door would fail to close properly when the time came. The residents walked in believing they were entering a shelter. The bombs fell. The door didn't seal. The radiation came in. Everyone inside was exposed to enough radiation over enough years to produce severe and irreversible mutation. They became ghouls. They built a community in the irradiated ruins beneath the vault, which became the settlement called Necropolis, which exists in the original Fallout. Vault-Tec's experiment was to document what prolonged radiation exposure does to real people over time. The residents of Vault 12 were the subjects. They didn't know this. Some of them were still alive in the original Fallout, decades after the bombs fell, and some of them had worked out by then what a door that failed to close at exactly the wrong moment must have meant. The terminal entries that still boot in the vault document the early period, the confusion about why the door didn't seal, the first radiation sickness, the shift in how the residents describe themselves as the mutations set in. There is a specific kind of horror in watching someone's language change as they realize what they're documenting is themselves. The Necropolis ghouls are the oldest confirmed outcome in the entire Vault program. They've been living with what Vault-Tec did to them for over 80 years. When the Vault Dweller finds them, some are still coherent, some are feral. The Master's army eventually destroys the Necropolis, which means the residents of Vault 12 were mutated by Vault-Tec's experiment, survived for 8 decades in the wasteland, and were then killed by the FEV supermutant program, which was itself a different Vault-Tec experiment that got loose. The Vault program's outputs have a way of finding each other. Now, Vault 81. We mentioned it in Level 1. It works. People live normal lives in there. Here's why. Vault 81 was designed to infect the residents with diseases without their knowledge and use their bodies as the testing environment for medical research. The residents would get sick without knowing why. Doctors would treat them without knowing the illness was manufactured. They thought they were just treating patients. The patients thought they were just sick. The reports went in as normal. Only the hidden research wing ever knew what was being introduced into the population and why. The original overseer was a doctor named Olivet. She found out what she'd been assigned to do. She refused. She sabotaged the delivery systems, sealed off the research wing, and let the vault run as a genuine shelter. Her reasons are in her terminal entries. She knew what refusing meant for her career, and she did it anyway. The residents of Vault 81 have normal lives because one person looked at what she'd been asked to do and said no. That is the only reason it works at all, and it almost didn't. Remove that decision and Vault 81 looks like every other entry in this level. The program was built to run on compliance. Olivet chose not to comply. One doctor, one decision she wasn't supposed to make. The vault is still open and still running today. That sequencing is pretty much the whole argument. Vault-Tec built a program that required Olivet to say no in order to not destroy the people inside it. And they ran 105 versions of that same program simultaneously across the whole country, betting that most overseers wouldn't. Olivet is the only documented case of one who did. The ratio, if we're being generous to the program's designers, is roughly 104 to 1. I find that more unsettling than anything in the experiments themselves. Not the experiments, the ratio. The program selected for compliance, for deference, for people who would follow the instructions even when the instructions were this. And it got those people 104 times over. It just also happened to get Olivet anyway 6 levels. Vaults that worked, as proof that everything else was a choice. Not enough of everything, on purpose. Engineered class warfare, a demographic extremity that was really about the genetics. A computer that ran a vault into silence following its instructions correctly. And people treated as the material the experiments were made from. All of it generating data for decades, going somewhere. The question that's been sitting under all of it, Where? Level 7, what it was all for. The Enclave, the shadow continuation of the pre-war United States government, the organization that considered itself the legitimate heir to everything that existed before the bombs, was the client for the Vault program from the beginning. Not a regulator, not an observer, the actual client. Vault overseers reported to them. The data the experiments generated was transmitted to them. They specified what they wanted to know, and Vault Tech built the instruments to find it out. What the Enclave wanted from 105 Vault experiments wasn't general behavioral science. They wanted specific answers. Which communities, under sustained and varied pressure across years and decades, developed the traits they considered worth selecting for? Which populations held together under indefinite confinement without becoming ungovernable? Which social structures emerged naturally from unusual founding conditions and proved stable across generations? They wanted a selection mechanism, a way of running the entire surviving American population through a filter, while nobody knew that's what was happening. Look at every level through this lens now. Vault 34 wasn't just studying scarcity, it was measuring two different responses to the same pressure: the group that walked away rather than fight for the armory, who went on to found a faction of their own, against the group that stayed and forced the issue, who ended up killing the Vault entirely. Both responses were useful data. Vault 43's Panther wasn't just bizarre, it was measuring how communities organize protection and authority when there's a threat that bypasses the usual social instincts. Useful if you're planning to impose new governance on a post-war population that didn't ask for it. Vault 114 never even got the chance to run, and that's worth sitting with for a second. The Enclave wasn't only collecting completed experiments, they were collecting designs, fully worked out and ready to deploy, whether or not the war happened to give them the chance to use this particular one. Vault 118 was asking whether the traits the Enclave valued in people would survive radical change in circumstances, whether they were fundamental or just a product of the conditions that produced them. Even with the body removed and every material difference erased, the answer came back the same. Those traits held. Vaults 68 and 69 were testing the floor. How small could a founding group be and still produce civilization across multiple generations? The Enclave planned to rebuild from a tiny, curated group of survivors they personally selected. They needed to know where the line was between viable and unsurvivable. Vaults 68 and 69 were built to find it in both directions simultaneously. What the genetic narrowing looks like across 5 generations in a closed population. What social structures emerge from extreme founding conditions and whether they hold or tip into crisis over time. That data was the core of what the Enclave needed, because their whole reconstruction plan depended on knowing whether what they were planning was viable or whether the starting number needed to be larger. The answer those vaults were designed to produce wasn't just yes or no. It was the specific shape of the failure curve. At what point does genetic narrowing become measurable? At what point does it become unsurvivable? You need both data points, not just the second one, because knowing where the line is requires knowing what's on both sides of it. Vault 51 was measuring something the Enclave cared about directly. What happens when you let a computer run everything and the community has no way to stop it? If you're planning to rely on AI systems to manage a post-war civilization, you need to know exactly how they fail before you deploy them at scale. Zax showed them exactly how that failure looks when it runs to completion, with the population producing the data right up until there was no population left to produce it. Vault 12 was a long-term radiation database. Decades of careful, documented data on what sustained radiation exposure does to human biology over time. Vault 81 was pharmaceutical research conducted on a population who believed they were simply unwell. Every experiment, reframed this way, is asking some version of the same question. Which communities, under which conditions, develop which traits, and how durable are those traits across generations? The Vault program was an audition, 105 simultaneous auditions running across the country for decades, feeding data to an organization that had already decided it was going to be the one to choose who inherited the post-war world, not Vault Tech. The Enclave. Vault Tech built the audition theater and ran all 105 productions. The Enclave was watching from the wings the entire time, receiving reports, deciding what the data meant for their plans. The TV show added something to this I keep thinking about. Pre-war Vault Tech executives in a boardroom discussing the Vault program with a specific kind of calm. Not contingency planning calm. Not the calm of people who've prepared for every scenario. Something more specific. The calm of people who know something about the timeline. The show doesn't confirm that Vault Tech caused the Great War. It is, however, very deliberate about what those executives appear to know and when, and about decisions that seem to have been made well before they would have been necessary if the war was genuinely unforeseen. The franchise has never made the accusation explicitly. It leaves the arithmetic arithmetic to you. The math is not complicated. What this means for every level on this list is that the lie was layered. The public lie, these are shelters. Your family will be safe. The operational lie, you are a resident when you are a test subject. And the structural lie beneath both. The entire program was framed as a survival system, when it was a selection mechanism for an organization that had already decided it was going to choose who inherited the post-war world. Vault-Tec didn't build vaults to save as many people as possible. They built them to identify who they thought deserved to inherit whatever came after. The Vault Boy giving the thumbs up on every billboard wasn't the mascot of a shelter company. He was the mascot of a sorting process. That sorting process ran for decades, across the whole country, in 122 sealed environments, with the results being transmitted somewhere the residents never knew about. The Vault Boy is still on merchandise. The program is still in the lore of every game. You can find the terminals. The data is still in there. Olivette looked at what she'd been asked to do and said, no, she is the only named individual in the documented Vault program who did that in the one vault we know about in enough detail to know it happened. The Vault Dweller came out of wherever they came from and took the Master's army apart. The Lone Wanderer activated Project Purity. The Sole Survivor found Vault 81 and found a community of people alive because one overseer made one choice 60 years before they arrived. The Courier changed the Mojave. None of these were the results the program was designed to produce. Vault-Tec built a sorting mechanism and ran it for decades and got their data. And the people the data was generated from used what the vaults had taught them to refuse every conclusion the program was supposed to reach. Olivette said no in a vault designed to make no mean career suicide. Zax's last survivor stayed human in a vault designed to make that increasingly impossible. The Vault Dweller who took apart the Master's army came out of a vault that spent decades studying whether you could break a population's will to leave. The Lone Wanderer who activated Project Purity came out of Vault 101, the permanently sealed one. The program was running that study on the exact people who would eventually go out and do the things the Enclave was trying to prevent. The selection mechanism selected for the capacity to refuse it. That's not an irony. That's the whole point. Level 1. Trash Killers. On this level, we have the Raider Gangs. Not a named character, as you can encounter several examples through all the games. For example, the ones of Fallout 3 are, in my opinion, the most savage depicted of the whole series. You can see his job on all your journeys through settlements, invaded buildings, and a variety of zones, all sharing a sinister atmosphere and horrible bodies scattered all around. One of the first examples that you can get is the first supermarket you commonly visit in Fallout 3, a dangerous place that, even before you enter, has a horrible depiction of what these raiders can and are willing to do. You can see bodies on pikes all around the nearby zones of the parking lot of the supermarket, burning bodies, screams of pain that can be heard at the far distance, and mutilated bodies. The horror. And then you enter the supermarket, bodies hanging on the ceiling, ones with less extremities that they should have, others with horrible marks on their body, and of course the raiders living there around all these bodies. Their job, of course. But all of this doesn't creep them out a little bit. If you aren't detected, you can even hear some chats about what they did to some of them and laugh, showing the decrease of humanity these kinds of people have. But these trash killers are far from the Level 2 killers. Level 2. Organized Killers. Imagine these people, if you can call them that way, as an improved version of the Raiders scattered around the Mojave, and originally on Vault 15, that doesn't help them a little bit to be better human beings. This faction faces a bit of evolution towards a more civilized faucet from the savages that they are on Fallout 2, to a bit less on Fallout New Vegas. The difference that makes them a bit over the normal Raiders are the fact that they have a more functional mind and the capability of using tactics. The Khans are more organized, have better control of the zones they fight for, and caring. If you could say that of his members, basically the difference is that they tend to take fights with a bit more brains to not sacrifice soldiers for nothing. See them as a raider-organized group specialized on attacking caravans and dealing drugs, with their other speciality being causing headaches to the NCR. This is pretty clear as they are involved in numerous skirmishes and kidnappings, which, bit by bit, ultimately provoked the NCR to respond in retaliation at the Bitter Springs Massacre. If you thought organized killers were bad, though, the next level will freak you out. Level 3. Ritualist. Killer. Fallout 4 bringed us a fleshed world that was seen from the POV of a person that lived both worlds, pre- and post-war, bringing us to this killer commonly known as Fenn's Phantom, that we originally know through Dear Detective tapes. Before tackling the tapes, we have to understand the context that we can learn outside the tapes, to get in a more clear way the context of this. First of all, he displayed the corpses and remains of his work underneath the fens, claimed as a base of operations by investigating him. And this only was known to a single detective that the killer single-handedly chose him to deliver some tapes. Overall, this showed that he felt heavy frustration with societal norms. viewing people as fake and transparent. So using that holotapes meant spreading his visions to all those that would listen, a little convoluted as those tapes only reached a single detective. Also, each macabre work that he created was accompanied by one or more X traced in chalk on a nearby wall, those X meaning the number of victims on the associated display. I point out the level 3 of this video because the tapes explored the psychology of the serial killer, and the results after the killer worked with the victims are a little left to interpretation. Let's look at them one by one to get a better feeling of the killer and what exactly he was looking for leaving the tapes. Tape 1 speaks to the detective about following the instructions in a correct way and ensuring that he is alone. After that, he says that you better be alone and that he put his work on display down there, encouraging the detective to see his work because that would make him happy. This first tape explains basically that the Fenn's phantom was thrilled to be followed around, and at the same time, he already was one step or several in advantage. Tape 2 talks a bit about appreciating your surroundings and telling that he can feel like himself only on the sewers, as the life up there is exhausting and full of hypocritical people, as you have to smile to people that may not care about you one way or another, and he's happy to share it with the detective. Chills run through my spine. This tape shows that he is a loss of humanity, thinks that everyone can't truly care for each other, and justifies his killing as he only does what he does because it is the only way he can be himself. Tape 3 explains that is getting anxious about the ultimate meeting they will have, as nobody really knows him as well as the detective, telling him about the thrill he feels being the object of fascination of someone like him, and at the same time that eventually he will be of the phantom, whatever it means. As we enter the aftermath of the chase that this detective had to live through to get the phantom, we start to see what really moves him. Our final tape, number 4, finishes with a high and sad note. He starts saying that he didn't want him to hurt him and didn't want it to be hurted, but know everything has come to an end, forgiving him because it doesn't matter anymore, as they are now together with all the time in the world to know each other. With this, we understand 2 things. If you didn't get it, you can find the actual assassinations on the sewers, the skeletons, and the X with chalk on the wall is still there, well, for this final tape. And X, we find 2 on the wall and 2 skeletons, meaning only one thing. Both died on the struggle with the phantom getting a bit of strength to mark the chalk, or he already had it planned, killed the detective and suicided, showing us that the killer only did what he did because he was a monster that only found satisfaction in killing while being chased for it. But these killers were nowhere near as crazy as the next level. Level 4, Sociopath Killer. This killer is very connected to our second level, but has his own category because even among all the disturbing and traumatizing things the raiders can do, he takes them to a whole newer level. He is known as Cook, a killer with a really high rank in the Fiends group, only being lower than Motor Runner, the leader. Never operates alone, and also has an inclination to eat his victims after doing disturbing things to them. He only targets smoothskins, a way of saying that he don't like doing what he does to mutants or ghouls. We talked about 3 levels already. The first 2 disturbing for killing and making display of their victims, but this one prefer to torture and do seriously disturbing things to his victims while they are alive. He is a sociopath. Why do you ask? He loves with an amorous affection his pet called Queenie, a Brahmin. Creepy at least, is getting only on the surface, because a person that can love so immensely a pet is still very much capable of doing horrible things to his victims. This type of monster is a potential and slowly growing problem as the wasteland isn't the easier zone to maintain security and ensure law. Luckily, we can track him and find him in Poseidon gas station, where he also lets Queenie roam free grazing. After everything you learn about him, you can also learn from others, mostly slave traders, about his inclination to always have new meat. And if he can't get it, he buys it. What makes him also dangerous, besides his craziness, is that if someone touches Queenie, let alone kill her, he enters on a crazy frenzy, attacking everything and everyone near him. Yeah, also his teammates. Showing the twisted mind he has. What a monster he was that if you go and talk with the victims after killing him, they will net you some good rewards as a thank you. Level 5, the leaders. We are entering on the most dangerous and disturbing levels of maniacs and really twisted people. But what makes this level the most dangerous is the mentality. The kind of people on this level are notorious for being normal in some aspects, or at least they can hide well enough. With some functionality on their mind, they are functional people in some way. But that doesn't mean letting out a monster when they want to. We are traveling all the way to Nuka World DLC on Fallout 4, specifically to talk about Dixie. a young woman that is a high-ranking member of the Disciples, a gang that is already centered on violence. But what level this is, that a young woman easily put his peers to shame and sticks out as the most bloodthirsty and dangerous in some cases. We can learn a lot about her different ways. One of the most prominent are the spectacle mounted on Fizztop Mountain. This is the lair of the Disciples, so you cannot expect a normal way of living. This gang is full of vicious raiders. So obviously, the decoration consists of things like human remains. Most of the mutilated corpses and trophies, or at least that's how she calls them, are souvenirs and holotapes provided by her victims, one way or another. The tapes can be listened to, and while they don't exactly share a story as everyone is independent of the other, well, they actually reveal the tactics, misdirections, persuasion, I could say, and basically all his girlish demeanor to talk their targets into letting their guard down. Also, one of the terminals around has an entry that talks about the leader of the gang deciding to elevate Dixie to that position as a means of maintaining her under control because she is a bit afraid of letting her run among the others and destroy the fragile peace between gangs with his intricate way of living. You as a character can try to persuade her to enslave his victims instead of killing them. Lose, if you ask me. And also can be a random encounter after dismantling the gang and not killing her. But ultimately, if you are on a normal route, killing her will be a must. This serial killer shows absolutely no remorse or interest in stopping its ways besides the brief interactions we can get. Still no way of redeeming it. And that is fine, as after everything she does, it is impossible to come back, in my opinion at least. Level 6. Tool, serial killer. We have explored a ton of situations where a serial killer can be born, as well as situations where a serial killer simply follows that path by conviction, pure joy, or as a twisted way of being alive. Now we shift the blame to not only them. Follow me on this. What about other killers that aren't exactly bad by themselves, but mostly follow an idea or are manipulated into following and defending a goal, most common through a larger organization or a political group with so much power? We are talking about Frank Horrigan, the main antagonist of Fallout 2, is the first on the list that isn't exactly a human, is more exactly a former human, now super cyborg mutant or something like that. For starters, was a giant man, the personal bodyguard of the President Dick Richardson until a hidden moment that was cataloged as an undocumented psychotic blunder that cost Frank his post, and the cause of being resigned to wasteland patrol duty that at the same time also cost him his humanity. In one of those expeditions, he came into contact with the forced evolutionary virus in a military base and started mutating, so the Enclave sent him to the oil rig to study him. From here, if it wasn't enough, everything went downhill, as a variety of studies were tried on him. The problem is that those experiments were more similar to a torture and having a guinea pig instead of trying to help him. Much is said about having him on heavy sedation for a period of 2 years. After a lot, and I really mean in a lot of experiments, he became a super mutant, machine, and also his physiology and mentality were shattered too. When they ran out of tests, the Enclave decided to redeploy him as an operative on the field, with a custom-engineered set of power armor with empowered supersized microfusion reactor, way better than the normal power armors of the Enclave. Nobody could match him, as he was the single deadliest combatant in all of New California. The only one who could beat him is the Chosen One, the protagonist of Fallout 2. The most important factor about him being level 6 instead of maybe 1 up or down is the mentality he has. As you know, the super mutants have low intelligence. Maybe for the humans forced by the forced evolution virus? Even worse. And also add that the Enclave ran various conditioning programs on him and was under presidential direct orders. Now you know where I am going with this. A conditioned, almost unbeatable monster that follows orders without any sort of questioning and a twisted reality. This is shown as he speaks to all the Wastelanders, referring to them as muties, while the mutant is himself. That alone shows how broken he is. Now, talking particularly about assassinations, on August 30th, year 2241, he had the task of tracking and kinda capturing, recruiting an elder farmer whose knowledge could prove dangerous. A straightforward mission guided by an institution by pure probabilities. By misfortune of him, the Chosen One witnessed the execution, and curiously enough, Frank, who wasn't known for his mercy, let him live, his most crucial mistake to that day. Now in the game, he also kills Matthew in a Brotherhood bunker located in San Francisco, again, while he was on a mission to acquire the vertibird plans. A lot of people he denomines peasants while you're exploring. There's some legends of their own comrades about what he is capable of doing, but in my opinion, all of what we already covered and his strange satisfaction for killing Make him one of the most lethal serial killers with the twist of covering his taste for killing with the reason of doing it for the mission. Level 7. Ideology. Killers. For the last level, I have 2 strong candidates, but one of them is from the TV series, so we will stick to the games as every serial killer we have covered comes from them in one way or another. The President, John Henry Eden, for anyone that don't know, he is an Zayx AI unit installed in the Raven Rock complex just northwest of Washington, D.C. For anyone that don't know, the President comes from a time pre-war and is loaded with data about the American story, and Eden's personality is based on an amalgamation or fusion. If you could see that way of every president that the nation knew, also borrowing all the cultural legends of every one of them, a bit of recipe for disaster if you ask me. For starters, he claims that comes from a rural Kentucky where he grew up. Abraham Lincoln roamed the countryside with his dog Honey from Knob Creek to Houghtonville. The problem started when he slowly became self-aware and started studying all the extensive archives left to him, mainly from the American government, developing a new personality based on the database, particularly from all the American presidents. Fast forward to assuming the power of the president after the Control Station Enclave blew up on Fallout 2, he started creating an army of robots and providing military technology to his human subordinates, successfully creating iBots, and started spreading the message of hope, and returned to the golden days of pre-war America. After this, the game starts, and we can prematurely see all the horrors of this genocidal politics. First of all, after getting his new personality, he designed a plan using Project Purity, the pivotal point of the story of Fallout 3. In simple terms, he wants to use a modified version of the forced evolutionary virus through the Capital Wasteland's water supply. Because why not? This will effectively kill anyone that has any bit of genetic mutation. This doesn't only speak about ghouls, super mutants, or monsters. Basically anyone besides the Enclave or the residents of the vaults without contact with the Wasteland are going to die. The plan is established as a full mass death plan on the Capital Wasteland, and Eden is fully aware of it. He justifies it as a restart for the world, and consolidate the full control to only that faction that to this point anyone knows that is the government itself. Obviously, this is the major point of conflict in the game, and he is the highest level just because he wants to kill everything and anything that doesn't align with his vision of the world. And even if you think the same, good luck surviving as the Enclave already has its numbers sealed. Some could think that is the typical ruler of the universe plan to destroy everything to rule nothing, and you're almost correct, as he is out of line, but the plan was not designed by Eden. It was designed by the previous computer, and the only reason that the plan couldn't go on is because of the player. In my books, that is the most near a serial killer would be of finishing with a whole country, just by some decision of cleaning the ethnic. All the other serial killers were on a so much smaller cap, so Eden takes the crown as the worst serial killer that he could have been. You could argue that he didn't get to run his plan, but that doesn't make it any better as the plan was in motion with all the consequences and massive amounts of death. Just being fine with the plan is becoming a serial murderer yourself. Anyway, level 1, surface icons. These are the protagonists with the biggest cultural footprint, but here's what makes them interesting. These protagonists are not simple, they're familiar. Take the Sole Survivor, for instance. On paper, the Sole Survivor is the most cinematic protagonist Fallout ever made. Before Lucy, that is. You start in a clean suburb. You've got a spouse, a newborn baby, and a normal morning. Then the world ends in the span of 30 minutes. Hope you didn't order any pizza, because it definitely won't be free. The opening of Fallout 4 is more important than people treat it, because it hardwires a specific emotional lens into the protagonist. The Sole Survivor isn't born in the wasteland. They remember the old world. They took part in the optimism and depression, the propaganda that everything was fine and dandy. They remember how clean everything looked right before it burned. So when they wake up in Vault 111, the Commonwealth isn't just scary. It's personal. It's the corpse of the world they once knew. The game isn't about finding Sean, assuming you feel like looking for him after 400 hours of playing. It's about whether anything about you is stable at all. Fallout 4 is obsessed with identity. The primary antagonistic faction, the Institute, doesn't just replace people. It replaces the idea of people. You can have the same face, the same voice, the same memories, and still not be you because you were taken away in the middle of the day or dead of night and replaced by a machine that thinks it's you. If you think that's just a faction theme, Fallout 4 makes sure the player feels it too. You can do everything right and still be hated by the ones you liked the most. You can do everything wrong and still get called a savior by those you like least. You're able to wear Minutemen colors and be treated like a symbol, or can wear Institute authority and be treated like a god. Fallout 4 is the only game where you can step out into a nuclear wasteland, fight 100 Deathclaws, and still ask random nobodies where your son is. Like, yeah dude, totally, let's do 20 questions in the apocalypse and not become wasteland legends. Speaking of, the Courier is iconic because their origin story is so stupidly simple it loops around into being perfect. You take a job, attempt to deliver a package, get ambushed, stolen from, and shot in the head, twice. You come out of it alive. The Courier is Fallout at its most brutally honest. History doesn't always choose heroes. Sometimes it chooses whoever was standing closest to the bomb. What makes the Courier feel surface level is simply how much of a meme they've become. After all, how many times have you seen the meme of the Courier simply being a mailman too angry to die? But the real version is far nastier. New Vegas and its DLC, should you decide to believe it, slowly reveals that the Courier isn't a blank slate dropped into the Mojave. They were already moving through this world before you ever press new game. The divide is what characterizes or destroys the Courier, and Ulysses, love him or hate him, exists to turn the Courier into a symbol, not just a person. Ulysses treats you like a walking answer to a question he's been asking all his life. He also tries to make you his pupil in a way, giving you lessons about nations, flags, and ultimately how fragile civilization is when you build it on myth and momentum. New Vegas does something clever here. The Courier can shape the Mojave into wildly different futures, but the game still frames you as a courier, a delivery person, humble mover of packages. Despite this, it also frames you as a conduit. Before we move on to the next level, let's talk about the protagonist who stood in the middle as the Brotherhood and the Enclave fought over the wounded soul at the heart of the American government. The Lone Wanderer is iconic because Fallout 3 is the game that dragged a whole generation into the Fallout franchise. You know the story. Vault 101, your dad leaves, you follow to find him. Simple. You then step into the Capital Wasteland and immediately get smacked with the big question of Fallout 3. What does it mean to rebuild? Because Project Purity is not just a quest to clean water for the Wastelanders. It's a symbol. Water is what gives life. Water ensures who controls the future. Water is what gives whoever controls it legitimacy over the rest of the region. So the Lone Wanderer becomes this weird hybrid protagonist. They're chasing their father, but they're also being pulled into the gravitational field of national destiny. Not getting rich, not winning the casinos, not becoming a king. Just the simple idea of giving people something clean to drink, healing the world, or sending it further into the decay and destruction it's already suffered through. Not only that, but the game also sets up a bigger idea that gets nastier the deeper you go. The Lone Wanderer isn't just a hero. They're a continuation of enabling pre-war institutional conflict. The Enclave is the rotten continuity of government, having been beaten once, yet coming back for round 2. The Brotherhood isn't necessarily all good either. It's militarized salvation, accept lions as your savior, or face death by thirst. So the Lone Wanderer becomes the hinge of a very American story of horror. Just don't think about how they're only a fresh 19 years old. Like, buddy, I was taking the goat yesterday. Now you're asking me to help save the region from guys with terrifying armor, helicopters, and robots? Anyway, that's level 1. Big names, big footprints, big myth energy. Next up, level 2 is where the franchise stops being famous protagonists and becomes foundational legends. They don't just matter to their games, they matter to the entire timeline. Level 2, classic legends. Level 2 protagonists are not mere icons. They're cornerstones of the universe that level 1 was built on. They're the reason the Wasteland became the Wasteland we recognize. They're the ones Fallout treats like the beginning of history because they were. They're also the beginning of consequences. Let's start at the beginning. The Vault Dweller starts with the simplest Fallout premise imaginable. Your vault is dying. Go outside, find a water chip, save the vault. If you've never played Fallout 1, you might assume that's the whole deal. It isn't. That water chip is bait, the single hook in a lake full of little treasures. It's the motivation that drags you out into a world where survival was just the first chapter. Fallout 1 does something that later games keep echoing. That's the Master and his children of the Cathedral, his unity. The terrifying thing about the Master, what makes Fallout 1 still feel strong, even 30 years later, is that the Master isn't just an evil villain just because he's evil. The Master is a morally gray antagonist because he's trying to solve a problem the world can't solve. The problem of how to end human conflict. We have a choice. We don't get to be forced to fix the world by removing humanity from the equation. Fallout doesn't let this be a clean hero story. At the end of the story, the Vault Dweller doesn't come back to a celebration. They come back to a vault, or rather, an overseer, that's scared of what they've become. The Vault Dweller is a protagonist who is not always rewarded for saving people. It's bittersweet. They're punished for reminding people reality exists, that the outside world is beyond the steel door. The Vault Dweller becomes a myth, not because they won, but because they walked out of safety, stared into the future, and came back holding trauma like a lantern. Then the Vault rejected them. The Vault Dweller saved the Vault, but they also set the stage for the Wasteland to start becoming a civilization again, which means they also set the stage for civilization to start doing what it always does, building power structures that eventually turn predatory, which is where the Vault Dweller's grandkid comes into play. The Chosen One is the protagonist who inherits the consequences of Fallout 1, not metaphorically, literally. Where do you think they got their name from? Their entire community of Arroyo solely exists because of the Vault Dweller's story. If Fallout 1 was about survival and discovery, then Fallout 2 is about what grows after survival. Nations, armies, government remnants, the return of high-level evil. Similarly to the Vault Dweller, the Chosen One begins their story not with a water chip quest, but with a similar level of crisis. Arroyo is dying, and you need a Garden of Eden creation kit. So the Chosen One goes out into a wasteland that's no longer just scattered settlements. It's politics. You've got the new California Republic growing into legitimacy. You've got the Slavers Guild and the mafia gangs of New Reno evolving into structured brutality. You've got entire cities that feel like the old world crawled out of the grave and put on a new outfit. But then you meet the Enclave. Fallout 2's Enclave is more than just the big villain faction. It's the distilled nightmare of pre-war authority. What happens when the ideal 1950s government becomes corrupted, but also technologically advanced? It's the idea that old world America's leaders didn't die with the bombs. They escaped, preserved themselves, and instead of learning humility, they doubled down on the same ideology that got the world killed in the first place. Fallout 2 is basically saying, good news, civilization has returned. And then you look around and realize civilization brought back racism, slavery, corruption, and politics. Fallout 1 hinted at it. Fallout 2 lives on it. Perhaps maybe civilization could have stayed dead another decade. The game also quietly reinforces the idea that protagonists are not random. Not all of them, at least. Some of them are selected by circumstance. Not destiny, not prophecy, but the intersection of myth, need, and systems that are hungry for a leader. Level 3, multiple protagonists. Level 3 is where the protagonist isn't a single legend anymore. It's a category, where there's no longer just a singular hero. Instead, they refer to the hero as being one or many of a certain group of people. Fallout has loved doing this because it lets the world feel bigger than your save file. Because if the protagonist can be plural, then the story can be systemic. Take the dwellers of Vault 76, in the titular Fallout 76, for instance. This is the easiest example of the protagonist as a crowd concept. You are a Vault Dweller, lowercase, but you're not the Vault Dweller, uppercase. You're one of many, leaving Vault 76 on Reclamation Day, or a year or more after Reclamation Day, depending on when you started the game. The surface-level view of Fallout 76 is dismissed as simply being a multiplayer Fallout, but the lore implication is way more interesting. The game pushes civilization attempts and rebuilding much earlier than most people intuitively place them, even earlier than Fallout 1. Fallout 76 doesn't reinforce the narrow worldview that the world ends, and then 200 years later, people build nations. In Appalachia, the world ends, and not even a week after the bombs drop, there are already coordinated attempts to reclaim territory not long after. And that changes the protagonist's mythology, because in older Fallout, the hero becomes a legend through scarcity. There aren't many people who can do what you did. In Fallout 76, the legend is born through collective pressure. People remember the Vault 76 dwellers the way you might remember a storm, not as one face, but as a force that changed the landscape. How's that for a force of nature? But ultimately, stories get told about you in simplified forms because nobody has time for nuance in the wasteland. In Fallout 76, that happens on a macro scale. The protagonists aren't a single mythic wanderer. They're an emergent response to collapse. That makes them perfect iceberg material because it introduces a concept that becomes extremely important later. On that note, Fallout 76 is the only Fallout where the protagonist is technically an entire vault population, which means the Chosen One prophecy became Chosen Everyone. Congratulations, your destiny is a group project. Please have your projects done by the end of the current season pass. Anyway, if the protagonist can be plural, level 4 is where the protagonist becomes something even stranger. Not plural, not legendary, just disputed. Here's where the iceberg gets sharper, because once the protagonist is a group, the story stops being about individual destiny and becomes about what happens when institutions try to steer an entire population. Level 4. disputed protagonists. Level 4 is where the iceberg starts melting away into old arguments. This is the layer where you'll hear people say things like, okay, but is that canon? Or Bethesda doesn't really count that. But the important thing for us is that these protagonists still matter, even if the franchise doesn't always want to look directly at them. Because they show you what Fallout could have been, what Fallout when it wasn't under Bethesda had been experimenting with, what Fallout tried on with different genres and settings, then Bethesda looked at it, took off, and pretended it had never happened to begin with. It isn't that they should have never happened, it's that the fans either didn't want to give them a chance, or the games they came out with weren't in with the gaming fanbase of the long ago. But for us to understand why that is, we have to unpack why the series treats them weirdly to begin with. Let's start with the warrior from Fallout Tactics, Brotherhood of Steel. Kind of a mouthful, isn't it? Most people simply shorten it to Fallout Tactics. The warrior is the kind of protagonist who feels like the franchise took one look at its own chaotic wasteland and asked, what if we made the protagonist a military officer? Not a lone wanderer, nor a wandering chosen hero. A military asset, a commanding figure, someone who doesn't just survive the wasteland, but organizes people inside it, operationally. For Fallout, that's a huge tonal difference, which means the warrior's protagonist motivation is less of the feeling that they're simply a person trying to live, and more that they're a mechanism that moves a faction through history. That's what's important, because it makes the warrior feel like an early prototype of something Fallout flirts with in both future Bethesda titles and Fallout New Vegas. The protagonist becomes a military political engine as opposed to a singular force of change. If the courier is the Mojave's turning point because they're a wild card, the warrior is the turning point because they're institutional. They don't just join a faction, they're part of a faction, and they become that faction's forward motion. Kind of funny when you think about it. Fallout 4 had Train and Pain Train, but the warrior was out there chugging like a locomotive out of hell long before the sole survivor was unfrozen. Thus, there's why the warrior is disputed iceberg material, because the moment you talk about Fallout Tactics, the conversation stops being about what happened in the story and starts being about whether the story counts. Because of Bethesda's approach to canon, Fallout Tactics becomes this shadow history in the community. Some people treat it as real, others treat it as though some parts are usable, but some aren't, while others treat it as a separate branch of canon entirely. Whether or not the franchise certifies it, the warrior still serves a narrative purpose in the iceberg. The warrior is also the only other Fallout protagonist who feels like they'd read the mission briefing. Everyone else sees a briefing, skims over it, throws it away, and asks where the loot is. Now, if the warrior is disputed because of canon fog, the next one is disputed because it feels like Fallout wearing someone else's skin. And the protagonists there, they are less a person and more a role you put on like armor. Okay, this is the protagonist that makes people lower their voice. Not because the lore is scary, because the vibes are. Get your Slipknot and mid-2000s death metal playlist ready, because we're about to take a trip back to a very particular point in time. The Initiate is the protagonist of Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, and the reason they belong in level 4 is that this game exists like an awkward parallel timeline. It is Fallout, technically, but it's Fallout at a very odd angle, like you're looking at the franchise through a cracked Circus Funhouse mirror. It's what makes it so that there is what makes the Initiate especially important for an iceberg list. The protagonist's identity becomes modular. You're the Initiate, but you're not necessarily one specific person in the way the Vault Dweller or Chosen One feels like a coherent myth. The Initiate is a label, a rank, a function. The Initiate is merely a role within the Brotherhood structure, because you're not playing a titular hero, you're playing a rank-and-file soldier who can be swapped out for any other soldier at any time. The protagonist in Brotherhood of Steel isn't being mythologized like a wasteland hero, their only role is being defined by the institution. They're being framed as a piece of Brotherhood process. Fallout TV show fans must be feeling incredibly validated right now, considering how Maximus and Thaddeus have been treated. But becoming a role and no longer being seen as a person is very unsettling, because it strips away the thing Fallout usually gives you, that feeling of becoming a legend organically. Instead, it feels like the game telling you in no unsubtle terms that you are a Brotherhood product. Now go and do what a product does. But if that sounds like I'm exaggerating, remember what Fallout loves in each game. Fallout loves to define people by roles, by manufactured labels that designate everything you are and, in some cases, everything you ever will be. Courier, lone wanderer, the Chosen One isn't even trying to be subtle about it. So, a protagonist whose entire being is being defined as the Initiate fits perfectly into Fallout's darkest obsession, the recurring idea of reducing identity into a simple or clear classification. The Brotherhood isn't just knights in cool armor. It's a culture, a machine that turns humans into functions, a hierarchy that produces roles. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Almost like how the Fallout franchise treats its own protagonists. It's the Initiate that shows off what happens when the protagonist becomes one of those roles first and a person second. They're unlike the warrior, because the warrior at least has some agency. The warrior is a person who rises to command command. The initiate is a role the game drops you into, and the role itself is the protagonist frame. And at this depth, Fallout is basically whispering that if you can define the protagonist as a role, then you can also define the protagonist as an experiment, or as a unit, or perhaps as a project. The protagonist becomes something built to do what it does, which is why the next level is where this list stops being about disputed games and starts being about protagonists that haunt the franchise from underneath the floorboards. Level 5. Filled slates. You know the lie every RPG tells you? The developers say that your character can be anyone. Fallout says that for several games, except that right after it says it, it quietly whispers that there are exceptions. Like when the game needs you to be a very specific kind of person. Every protagonist has leaks, little cracks where the writers accidentally or very intentionally reveal who this person is supposed to be, even if you're trying to roleplay as a saint, a psycho, or a barely literate mutant with a combat knife. The Vault Dweller was you, until Fallout 2 made him a definitive male, turning him into a historical figure. Fallout 1 gave you a clean slate, but then it got a sequel, and the opening minutes hits you with the worst thing a roleplayer can hear. Actually, your character has a legacy now, and they're not your character anymore. And here's the sneaky part. Once your protagonist becomes a legend, the game isn't asking what you did or didn't do anymore. It's telling you that your last character had impacts, with each impact either sending you into joy or angering you beyond belief. Why? Because history does that. It sandpapers people down into one story, and Fallout uses that to quietly pick default for your character without saying it out loud. The Chosen One also isn't as free as they look. In Fallout 2, the Chosen One can be a clown, a genius, or a menace, but the world treats the Chosen One like what their name entails. They didn't just win a fight, they nuked a government. They basically ended the Enclave as a functioning potential superpower, at least on the West Coast. But as soon as the credits roll, NPCs in the next game don't remember your dialogue trees. They remember the crater. So your blank slate tribal becomes a mythic figure whether you like it or not. When that happens, once your protagonist becomes a myth, the game starts doing something subtle. It stops letting you be nobody. You are always the person who did the thing, even if you don't want to carry that weight. The Courier is perhaps the biggest offender here. New Vegas pretends you're a total mystery, but the DLC, especially Lonesome Road, starts stapling history onto your back like a wanted poster. Sometimes the world roleplays you, and you're stuck answering for it. The sole survivor is pre-written in a way Fallout almost never did before. Fallout 4 gives you voice acting. Sounds harmless, right? Wrong. Voice acting forces tone. Tone forces personality. And on top of that, Fallout 4 gives you a defined life. You lived before the war, you had a spouse, and a baby on top of that. Then you watched your spouse die and your baby gets stolen in a cutscene longer than anyone really cares. So even if you want to roleplay as someone who doesn't really care about Sean, and you just are here to collect desk fans, the game keeps nudging you that your son exists, that your character cares about him, even when you don't. That's not just bad writing. That's the game locking you into a premise. Here, you begin to realize the protagonists aren't fully custom. They're custom within a linear path. The deeper you go, the narrower that path gets. Because the next level, we start talking about protagonists that barely exist in canon at all, and yet they haunt the franchise anyway. Level 6. Dark Mysteries. Here is where you stop asking what happened in the story and start asking what even counts as a story. Level 6 protagonists are the ones that feel like urban legends, not because they're fictional, but because Fallout itself doesn't know what to do with them. We went over the Warrior earlier, but let's return to them for a moment. The Warrior is a Brotherhood soldier who rises through the ranks and basically becomes the Hammer of the Midwest. But here's the messy part. Tactics has elements that Bethesda-era Fallout has referenced, but the game's full plot, the exact events, the details, that's the debate. Bethesda staff have, at different times, suggested tactics is not fully canon, but also not totally rejected either. So the Warrior becomes this weird half-ghost, a protagonist who exists in this liminal space. Too important to erase completely, but also too inconvenient to confirm completely. Which means the Warrior is perfect for Bethesda and their approach to the world, because they can treat them like a myth inside the world. A Midwest Brotherhood story that got told and retold until nobody agrees on what was true. And honestly, that's exactly how real history works. Similarly, as we talked about before, Fallout, Brotherhood of Steel has the Initiate as the player character concept. Except this game is the franchise's awkward family photo. You know the one. Everyone's smiling, but someone's eyes are screaming. Please don't post this. It's often treated as non-canon in most serious lore discussions, and it basically doesn't get referenced the way the mainline games do. But that's what makes it level 6. Because when something exists, but the franchise refuses to integrate it, it creates a shadow protagonist, someone who technically had an adventure in the wasteland, and then got memory holed fueled by the timeline, which raises the fun question. If the wasteland is full of unreliable stories and lost records, could Fallout Boss be treated as an in-universe bad retelling of real events? Perhaps the Initiate is the hero or villain of a campfire myth where the details got warped? That's a lore-friendly way to place it without saying it did happen in the strict sense. One last trip back in time. After Fallout 2 and its spin-offs, Van Buren was the cancelled original Fallout 3 by Black Isle. Its protagonist? The prisoner, who starts in a cell. Cell block 13 to be exact. There's a breakout, and you're one of many to escape. You're pursued across the Southwest by a massive robot while you're also trying to find other people who escaped. As is standard, the plot spirals into big, ugly, political Fallout themes. And here's the Mind Melter. Van Buren never released, but huge chunks of its DNA ended up living on. In future titles, from Fallout 3 to Fallout 76. In design ideas, from the Legion to the bomb space station. In the conceptual bones of New Vegas, and later lore that stemmed from it. So the prisoner becomes this proto-protagonist. A Fallout mainline hero who never got to be, but still casts a shadow. Sometimes the most important protagonist is the one you never played, because their cancelled story still influenced what came after. And if you've ever felt like the Mojave has old ghosts baked into it, you're not crazy. That's Van Buren's afterimage. Level 7. Function, not human. Okay, last level. This is where we will stop looking into slightly or highly obscure facts you didn't know, and we'll look into the deepest level of all, the idea of the Fallout franchise, treating the idea of what a protagonist actually is. It's the stuff that makes you look at every hero and ask if they are even a character, or are they the game's tool? Fallout protagonists are canon collapsed. What does that mean, exactly? Well, every Fallout protagonist has a million possible runs. The good run, the evil run, perhaps even an idiot run, not to mention the steal everything that wasn't nailed down run, or maybe the never using guns run, using only a spear or kick. But sequels can't acknowledge all of that, so Fallout does something clever. Each game after the first collapses the protagonist into an acceptable history. The world remembers outcomes, not your decision-making process. So the protagonist becomes a kind of quantum state, rather than a definitive figure. A person who definitely did something, but whose exact details are blurry because history simplified them. That's why the Vault Dweller can be the ancient hero who saved the world, while the specifics get fuzzy. It's why the Chosen One becomes the tribal who destroyed the Enclave by nuking an oil rig and saved Arroyo. It's why the Courier becomes a symbol that other characters try to define for you. Even the official stance seems to be basically that it's unclear on purpose. If that's true, then here's the final implication. The protagonist is partially defined by the tools the world gave them. A Vault Dweller isn't just a person. They're a person with a Pip-Boy and Vault conditioning, overcoming it at the cost of losing the only home they ever knew. A Courier isn't just a person. They're a person shaped by the roads, the routes, the Republic, the Empire, the war. The sole survivor isn't just a parent. They're a pre-war relic, with a retro-futuristic interface firmly snapped onto their wrist, walking into a world that treats them like an anomaly. So at level 7, you can read the protagonists as interfaces the world uses to change itself. They are the Wasteland's catalyst, not just its hero. The true protagonist is the legend the Wasteland tells about you. This is the creepiest part, and I love it. Fallout is full of people rewriting reality through storytelling. The Brotherhood turns technology into a revered reverence. Caesar turns history into corrupted propaganda. The Enclave turns the government into a ghost costume. Raiders turn violence into culture. So what happens when you show up? The Wasteland does the same thing to you. It turns you into a story. That's why NPCs talk about the Vault Dweller, like a Wasteland legend. Why the Chosen One was born from a prophecy. The Lone Wanderer as a radio celebrity. The Courier is like a good or bad omen. The Sole Survivor is like a glitch in time. And the Vault 76 residents is helping hands from a single source. They become masks, and the mask becomes more real than the person under it. That's level 7. The protagonist is not a biography. The protagonist is an event, a force, a myth the setting manufactures to make sense of chaos. And the funniest part? You, the player, are sitting there like, I just wanted to collect bottle caps and decorate my house. And the Wasteland is like, no, you are destiny. Fulfill it. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every crazy Fallout 4 theory that might actually be true, click the video on the screen.